Justice will be yours. That's what Rosalie Price promised over her parents' graves, kneeling in ashes that still smelled of smoke and death. But when justice requires becoming a bride to the beast who ordered the slaughter, you discover that revenge is just grief wearing a sharper dress, and both will destroy you if you're not careful. Tonight, she would walk into the Lycan King's chamber. Tonight, she would drive wolfsbane-coated steel through his heart. Tonight, 3 years of pain would finally mean something. Except the king she came to kill had been waiting 300 years for her arrival. And the curse binding him wasn't about power or cruelty, it was about a soul split into 9 pieces, scattered across time, hidden in the bodies of unsuspecting women. Women like Rosalie, who carried not 1 fragment but 2, who was both the weapon and the cure, who would have to choose between the vengeance that kept her alive and the truth that might destroy her. Chapter 1. The Bride in Black. The wedding dress was a lie. Rosalie stood before the cracked mirror in the abandoned chapel, adjusting the delicate lace that covered her collarbone. White silk cascaded down her frame like fresh snow, pristine and innocent. But sewn into the hem hidden where no eye could see were 6 silver daggers, each blade kissed with wolfsbane poison, enough to kill a Lycan king. "You look beautiful, child." The voice came from the shadows behind her. Elder Vera Gallegos emerged, her weathered face creased with worry. "Too beautiful for what you're about to do." Rosalie's reflection didn't smile. The girl staring back at her had emerald eyes that once sparkled with laughter, auburn hair that once danced in sunlight, lips that once knew how to speak without calculating every word. That girl had died 3 years ago, the night the Lycan King's pack descended on Riverside Village, the night they'd torn her parents apart like paper dolls. "Beauty doesn't matter where I'm going," Rosalie said quietly, her fingers tracing the hidden daggers. "Only justice does." Vera's hand settled on her shoulder, gentle but firm. "Justice and revenge are not the same thing, Rosalie. Your grandmother would want you to know the difference." "My grandmother is dead." The words came out sharper than intended. Rosalie softened her voice, turning to face the older woman. "They're all dead, Elder Vera. Every single person I loved was slaughtered by that monster. If this is revenge, then revenge is all I have left." The elder's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "The Lycan King. They say he's not what you expect. The castle servants whisper that he's cursed, that he searches for something. He's a murderer." Rosalie's voice cut through the chapel like a blade. "He ordered the attack on Riverside. He gave the command that turned my world into a graveyard. Whatever curse he bears, it's not punishment enough." Vera reached into her cloak and withdrew a small vial filled with shimmering liquid moonwater, blessed by the last priestess of the Silver Moon Covenant. "If you're determined to go through with this, take this, 1 drop on your skin, and you'll be invisible to Lycan senses for 1 hour. It's not much, but it might save your life." Rosalie took the vial, tucking it between her breasts where the dress held it secure. "I don't plan on needing saving. No one ever does." Vera cupped Rosalie's face with both hands, studying her like a mother memorizing her child's features one last time. "The Resistance sent 12 brides before you. None returned. The king sees through deception like glass. Whatever he is, whatever darkness lives in that castle, it's older and crueler than our plans. Then I'll be the 13th. Rosalie pulled away gently but firmly. 13 is a lucky number for witches, isn't it? Only if the witch survives. Outside, a carriage weighted black lacquered wood, pulled by 4 midnight horses. The Lycan King sent these carriages to collect his brides, young women offered as tribute from villages across his territory. Most went willingly, desperate families hoping their daughters might become queens. They never knew that every bride who entered Blackthorn Castle vanished without a trace. No one knew what the king did with them. No one except the Resistance, who'd spent 3 years gathering intelligence, piecing together fragments of truth from terrified servants and corrupted officials. And what they'd learned was this: the Lycan King was searching for something. Someone. Every bride was a test, a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit. Rosalie intended to be the piece that fit perfectly right before she drove silver through his heart. The carriage driver didn't speak as she climbed inside. His face was hidden beneath a deep hood, but she caught the gleam of yellow eyes in the darkness. A lycanthrope then, one of the king's creatures. She kept her breathing steady, her face serene. Just another frightened bride. Just another lamb to slaughter. The carriage lurched forward, and the chapel disappeared behind them. Blackthorn Castle rose from the mountains like a crown of thorns, all dark spires and impossible angles. Even from miles away, Rosalie could feel it, a presence that pressed against her chest, making each breath slightly harder than the last. Power. Ancient and absolute. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory. The old magic isn't gone, Rosalie. It's just sleeping. And when it wakes, the world will remember what it means to fear. Was the Lycan king old magic? Or just a monster with too much power and too little humanity? She would find out soon enough. The carriage climbed the mountain road as darkness fell. Through the window, Rosalie watched the last rays of sunlight die behind the peaks, painting the sky in shades of blood and bruise. Appropriate, she thought. A bleeding sky for a night of bloodshed. Her fingers found the daggers beneath her dress, touching each one like a prayer. 6 blades, 6 chances. She only needed one to connect. The carriage passed through gates that opened on their own, groaning like the mouth of some great beast. Rosalie's heart hammered, but she forced herself still. Fear was natural. Fear kept you sharp. It was panic that killed. When the carriage finally stopped, the driver opened her door without a word. She stepped out into a courtyard, lit by torches that burned with silver flames, witch fire, meant to ward off dark spirits. The irony wasn't lost on her. What spirit could be darker than the one who ruled here? A woman waited at the castle entrance, tall and elegant, with silver-streaked black hair and eyes like chips of ice. She wore a gown of deep crimson that seemed to drink in the torchlight. Welcome, bride. Her voice was cultured, refined, completely devoid of warmth. I am Lenore Lyons, mistress of Blackthorn Castle. You will follow me. You will speak only when spoken to. And you will remember that the king's mercy is a gift, not a guarantee. Rosalie dipped into a curtsy, playing her role perfectly. Thank you, mistress. I am honored to be here. Lenore's laugh was like breaking glass. Honored. How refreshing. The last bride screamed the entire way to the king's chamber. Her ice-chip eyes studied Rosalie with predatory interest. You're different from the others. I can smell it on you. Not fear, but something else, something sharper. Rosalie's pulse jumped, but she kept her expression innocent. I've always been told I have an unusual scent. My grandmother said I was born under a blood moon. Was she? Lenore circled her slowly, a wolf evaluating prey. How fascinating. The king does so love unusual things. She stopped directly in front of Rosalie, close enough that their breaths mingled. Tell me, bride. Do you know what happens to the women who come here? They become queens, Rosalie whispered. Or they disappear. Smart girl. Lenore's smile was all teeth. Very smart. But intelligence won't save you from what waits in that chamber. The king is particular. He has very specific tastes, very specific needs. She leaned in, her lips nearly touching Rosalie's ear. And he's been waiting a very long time for someone exactly like you. A chill ran down Rosalie's spine, not fear, but recognition. How could the king be waiting for someone like her when he'd never met her? Unless, no. It was a trick. Psychological warfare meant to unbalance her. She couldn't afford doubt. I'm ready to meet him, Rosalie said firmly. Lenore pulled back, studying her with something almost like respect. Yes, she murmured. I believe you are. Come. The king is waiting, and he is not a patient man. They walked through corridors that seemed to shift and breathe, walls lined with portraits of stern-faced ancestors and tapestries depicting wolves hunting beneath full moons. Servants scattered at their approach, pressing themselves against walls with their eyes downcast. Terrified. All of them absolutely terrified. What kind of monster inspired such fear in his own people? Finally, they stopped before massive double doors carved with intricate scenes of wolves and roses intertwined. Lenore placed her palm against the wood, and the doors swung open silently. The king will see you now, she said. Remember, speak only truth. He can taste lies on your tongue. With that chilling advice, she turned and left, her crimson gown trailing behind her like spilled blood. Rosalie stood alone before the open doors, peering into darkness beyond. From within came a voice deep, rough, impossibly male. Come in, little bride. I've been waiting for you. And despite every ounce of training, every moment of preparation, Rosalie's hands trembled as she stepped across the threshold into the Lycan King's chamber. The room was vast, lit only by a fireplace that cast dancing shadows across stone walls. She could see a massive four-poster bed draped in black silk, a table laden with untouched food, weapons mounted on the walls, swords and axes that looked ancient and hungry. But she couldn't see him. "Close the doors," the voice commanded from the shadows. She obeyed, hearing the heavy locks slide into place behind her. Trapped. She was trapped now with a monster. "Do you know why you're here?" he asked. Rosalie swallowed, her fingers finding the hidden daggers through her dress. "I was sent as tribute. To become your bride." "Wrong." The word was a growl. "You're here to kill me." Her blood turned to ice. He knew. Chapter 2. The King's Truth. Rosalie's hand flew to the daggers beneath her dress, but before her fingers could close around the hilt, he moved. One moment, he was invisible in the shadows. The next, he was everywhere. A hand massive, clawed, burning hot wrapped around her wrist with crushing gentleness. Another caught her throat, not squeezing, just holding. She was lifted off her feet and pressed against the cold stone wall, trapped between unyielding rock and an even more unyielding body. "Careful, little assassin," he breathed against her ear. "Those daggers are poisoned with wolfsbane. One scratch, and you'll be dead before you hit the floor. The blades were meant for me, but the poison doesn't discriminate." Her heart hammered so violently she thought it might tear through her ribs. She could feel him against her, solid, enormous, radiating heat like a furnace. But she still couldn't see his face. The shadows clung to him like a second skin, refusing to let her glimpse the monster who held her. "How did you know?" she managed, her voice barely a whisper. He laughed, a sound like distant thunder. "I can smell death on you. It perfumes your skin sweeter than any flower. And your heartbeat, it doesn't race with fear or anticipation like the other brides. It races with purpose, with rage." His thumb traced her pulse point, feeling the frantic rhythm. "You came here to murder me, didn't you, Rosalie Price?" She went rigid at the sound of her name. How do I know who you are?" He leaned closer, and she finally caught a glimpse of his face in the firelight, strong jaw covered in dark stubble, a cruel mouth that looked like it had forgotten how to smile, and eyes, God, those eyes. They glowed amber in the darkness, ancient and knowing, filled with something that looked almost like sorrow. "I've known who you were since the moment you were born," he said quietly. "I've been waiting for you for 23 years, Rosalie. Waiting for the girl with fire in her blood and vengeance in her heart. The girl who would be brave enough or foolish enough to walk into my castle wearing a wedding dress full of daggers. You're insane." She tried to twist away, but he held her effortlessly. "Let me go." "No." The single word was absolute. Final. "You're mine now. You came here of your own free will. And the laws are clear. Once you cross my threshold, you belong to me. Body, soul, and every murderous intention in between." Rage flooded through her, burning away the fear. "You murdered my family. You destroyed my village. You took everything from me. And you expect me to just— I never touched your village." His voice was ice and iron. "I never gave that order." She froze. "Liar. I don't lie." He released her throat but kept her wrist captured, his clawed fingers gentle despite their obvious strength. 3 years ago, Riverside Village was attacked by lycanthropes. Your parents were killed. Your grandmother died protecting you. 47 people slaughtered in a single night. He recited the facts like a judge reading a sentence. "But I didn't send those wolves, Rosalie. Someone else did. Someone who wanted you to hate me. Someone who knew exactly what you would become." "No." She shook her head violently. "The survivors saw the banners. Your banners. The Black Wolf of Blackthorn can be replicated by anyone with fabric and dye." He finally released her, stepping back into the shadows. "Think, Rosalie. If I wanted your village destroyed, why would I leave witnesses? Why would I let anyone survive to tell the tale? I've ruled these territories for 300 years. I don't make mistakes that sloppy. 300 years. The words hung in the air like smoke. He was older than she'd imagined. older than anyone had guessed. Then who? She demanded, her voice breaking. Who killed them? That, he said softly, is what we're going to find out. Together. Together? She laughed bitterly. You think I'm gonna help you? After everything? You don't have a choice. He moved to the fireplace, and for the first time, she saw him fully in the light. He was beautiful, terrifyingly, impossibly beautiful. Tall, easily 6.5 feet with broad shoulders and a warrior's build. Dark hair fell to his collar, slightly too long, slightly wild. His face was all sharp angles and masculine grace, the kind of face that belonged in legends and nightmares. But it was his eyes that held her captive. Those amber eyes that glowed with inner fire, ancient and weary and hungry all at once. This was the monster? This was the creature who haunted her dreams. Stop staring, he said without looking at her. I know what I am. What are you? The question escaped before she could stop it. He turned and something flickered across his face, pain perhaps or memory. Cursed. I am cursed, Rosalie Price, and you are the key to breaking that curse, whether you want to be or not. That's insane. Is it? He moved toward her again, and she forced herself not to retreat. Tell me, little assassin, have you ever wondered why you survived that night when everyone else died? Why the wolves tore apart everyone you loved but left you cowering in your grandmother's root cellar, completely unharmed? She had wondered. God! She'd wondered every single day for 3 years. The guilt had eaten her alive, survivor's guilt, the elders called it. But it felt like something more, like she'd been marked, chosen for something. My grandmother cast a protection spell, she whispered. With her dying breath she did, he interrupted. But protection spells don't work on lycanthropes unless they're meant to. Unless the wolves themselves choose to honor them. He was close again, close enough that she could smell him pine and smoke, and something wild. Those wolves didn't kill you because they couldn't. They were under orders to leave you alive, to make you suffer, to make you hate me enough to do exactly what you're doing right now. Her mind reeled. That's not possible, isn't it? His hand came up, and she flinched, but he only touched her face, one clawed finger tracing the curve of her cheek with devastating gentleness. Someone very powerful wanted you standing exactly where you are right now. In my castle, in my chamber. Close enough to kill me. His eyes burned into hers. The question is, are you going to do what they want? Or are you going to help me find out who really murdered your family? Like this video if you believe Rosalie deserves the truth about who destroyed her world. Because people like Rosalie need an audience that won't let them face these monsters alone. Rosalie stepped back, her mind spinning. This couldn't be real. It was manipulation. Another layer of cruelty, designed to break her. Why should I believe anything you say? She demanded. You're the Lycan king. You're the monster in every story. You're lonely. The word fell between them like a stone. I am so very, very lonely, Rosalie. And I am tired of being the villain in everyone else's story when I've spent 3 centuries trying to protect this kingdom from itself. Something in his voice, raw and honest and achingly human, made her pause. The brides, she said carefully. The 12 women who came before me. What happened to them? His expression darkened. They're alive. Every single one. He gestured to a door she hadn't noticed before. They live in the West Tower with servants and comfort and anything they desire. I've never harmed them. Never touched them. I interviewed each one. Realized they weren't what I was searching for, and gave them the choice. Stay and live as honored guests, or return home with gold enough to start new lives. And they chose to stay, in the castle of a monster? They chose safety. His smile was bitter. The world outside these walls is crueler than I could ever be. At least here, they're protected. Fed. Valued. He turned away. I am not the monster you think I am, Rosalie, but I am the monster everyone needs me to be. It's easier that way, easier than explaining the truth. Then explain it to me. She surprised herself with the words. If you're not my enemy, prove it. Tell me the truth. He was silent for a long moment, staring into the fire. When he spoke, his voice was soft, sad. 300 years ago, I was a prince. Not of this kingdom, but of another one that's been forgotten by history, erased by time and magic. I was young, arrogant, powerful, and I made a bargain with a witch to save my dying sister. He paused, his jaw tightening. The witch saved my sister. And then she cursed me. Transformed me into this thing. Half man, half beast. Neither fully human nor fully wolf. Trapped between two worlds. Belonging to neither. Rosalie found herself drawn closer, listening despite herself. The curse can only be broken one way, he continued. I must find my true mate, the one soul in all the world whose heart recognizes mine. When we join, when she accepts me fully, the curse will shatter. I'll be human again. He turned, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. But the witch was clever. She scattered pieces of my mate's soul across time. Every generation, a fragment is born in a different woman, and I must find all the pieces before the curse can be broken. She couldn't find words. That's impossible. It should be. His smile was grim. But I've found them, Rosalie. Over 300 years I've found 7 fragments. 7 women, whose souls carry a piece of my mate's essence. They're safe here, in the castle, waiting. He moved toward her, slow and predatory. And you, little assassin, are the 8th fragment. The moment you crossed my threshold, I felt it. Your soul calling to mine. You are part of what I've been searching for my entire cursed existence. She backed away until she hit the wall. No, that's insane, I'm not. You are. He was in front of her now, caging her with his arms but not touching. And there's only one fragment left to find. One more piece of the puzzle, when all 9 are united. His eyes burned with desperate hope. I'll finally be free. And if I refuse? Her voice shook. If I don't believe any of this? His expression softened into something almost like tenderness. Then you'll stay here anyway. Because the moment you entered Blackthorn Castle with murder in your heart, you became mine. That's the law. That's the curse. He leaned closer, his breath warm against her face. You're mine tonight, Rosalie Price. And every night after. Whether you accept it or not. She should have been terrified. She should have been reaching for her daggers, fighting, screaming. But all she could think was, what if he's telling the truth? Chapter 3. The West Tower. I want to see them, Rosalie said, her voice steady despite the chaos in her mind. The other brides, if they're truly alive and well, prove it. The Lycan King studied her for a long moment, those amber eyes searching her face for something she couldn't name. Then he stepped back, releasing her from the cage of his arms. Very well. He moved to the door, his movements fluid and powerful. But understand this. Rosalie, once you meet them, once you hear their stories, there's no going back to your simple narrative of monster and victim. The truth is always more complicated than revenge allows. He opened the door and gestured for her to follow. She hesitated only a moment before gathering her skirts and stepping into the corridor. The daggers pressed against her thigh beneath the silk, a reminder that she still had choices, still had weapons, still had a mission. Even if that mission was becoming less clear with every passing moment, they walked through the castle in silence. Rosalie tried to memorize the route left at the portrait of the woman with sad eyes. Right at the staircase with the wolf carvings, straight through the gallery where moonlight streamed through stained glass windows. Escape routes. She needed to know escape routes. You won't need them, he said without looking at her. She froze. What? The escape routes you're mapping. He glanced back, and there was something almost like amusement in his expression. I can hear your thoughts, Rosalie. Not literally, but your heartbeat changes every time you spot a potential exit. It quickens, spikes with hope. He turned away. There are 47 ways out of this castle. I could tell you each one. But none of them would save you from what's coming. And what's coming? She demanded, hurrying to keep pace with his long strides. The truth. He stopped before a heavy wooden door carved with roses and wolves intertwined the same pattern from his chamber. Are you ready for it? She lifted her chin. I came here to kill you. I think I can handle meeting some women. His laugh was low and dark. We'll see. He actually knocked, as if seeking permission to enter his own castle. Ladies, I have someone I'd like you to meet. The door opened, and a young woman stood in the threshold. She was beautiful, petite, with golden hair that cascaded to her waist, and blue eyes that sparkled with intelligence. She wore a simple green dress, comfortable and clean, and when she saw the king she smiled. Smiled. At the monster. "Your Majesty," she said warmly. Then her gaze shifted to Rosalie. "Oh, a new arrival?" Her smile widened. Come in, come in. We've been expecting you." Rosalie stepped inside, and her breath caught. The West Tower was nothing like a prison. The circular room was enormous, furnished with plush sofas and chairs arranged around a massive fireplace. Bookshelves lined the walls, stuffed with volumes both ancient and new. Tapestries depicting peaceful forest scenes hung between tall windows that showed the mountain landscape in moonlit glory. A spiral staircase led to what must be private chambers above. And everywhere there were women. 7 of them, to be exact. All different ages, different appearances, different backgrounds, but all of them looked happy, content, well-fed and well-dressed and completely unharmed. "Everyone," the golden-haired woman announced. "We have a guest. This is—" She paused, looking at Rosalie expectantly. "Rosalie," she managed, her mind reeling. "Rosalie Price." A chorus of warm greetings erupted. The women descended on her like a flock of friendly birds, ushering her to a chair, pressing tea into her hands, asking questions faster than she could process. "When did you arrive? What village are you from? Did Lenore give you the scary speech?" "She always gives the scary speech." "Your dress is beautiful. Did they force you to wear white, or did you choose it?" "Ladies." The king's voice cut through the chaos, gentle but commanding. "Give her space to breathe. She's had a rather eventful evening." The women immediately backed off, though their expressions remained curious and welcoming. Rosalie clutched the teacup like a lifeline, staring at each face in turn. They weren't prisoners. They weren't victims. They were a family? "I'll leave you to get acquainted," the king said, moving toward the door. But his eyes found Rosalie's, and there was a warning in them. Or perhaps a plea. "I'll return in an hour. That should give you enough time to hear what you need to hear." Then he was gone, the door closing softly behind him. Silence fell over the room. 7 pairs of eyes studied Rosalie with varying degrees of sympathy, curiosity, and understanding. Finally, the golden-haired woman sat down across from her. "I'm Mia Owens. I was the first bride, 6 years ago. I came from Hillcrest Village." She gestured to the others. "This is Eunice Riggs, Kelly Anthony, Tiffany Combs, Millie Ruiz, Neva Bass, and Alicia Booker. We've all been exactly where you are right now." "Terrified and confused?" Rosalie whispered. "And probably armed," Eunice added with a knowing smile. She was older than the others, perhaps 40, with silver threading through her dark hair. "I had a knife strapped to my thigh when I arrived. Tried to stab him the moment he got close." "What happened?" Rosalie asked, morbidly curious. "He disarmed me in about 3 seconds, then asked if I wanted to talk about why I was so angry." Eunice's expression softened, and for the first time in my life, someone actually listened to my answer. Kelly leaned forward, her red hair catching the firelight. "Let me guess what you're thinking. You're thinking this is all an elaborate trick, that we're under some kind of spell or compulsion, that the king is a monster who's somehow brainwashed us into compliance." Rosalie flushed, because that was exactly what she'd been thinking. "We thought the same thing," Tiffany said gently. She was the youngest, barely 20, with dark skin and kind eyes. "I spent my first 3 weeks here looking for the catch, waiting for the torture to begin, for him to show his true nature. And," Rosalie prompted, "and he never did." Mia's voice was soft but certain. "He interviewed each of us, asked about our lives, our dreams, our fears. Then he explained the curse, showed us proof, ancient texts, witness testimonies from people who've known him for decades, magical signatures that can't be faked. And he gave us a choice. Stay as honored guests while he searches for the final fragment, or leave with enough wealth to start over anywhere we wanted." "Why would you stay?" Rosalie demanded. "If you're free to go, why stay with a Charon?" She caught herself. "With a monster?" Millie finished, her dark eyes sharp. "Because out there, we were already prisoners. Prisoners of poverty, of abusive husbands, of villages that saw us as burdens or commodities. She set down her teacup with deliberate care. Here, we're safe, protected. We have food, education, purpose. The king asks nothing of us except our company occasionally, and even that's optional. He's lonely, Neva added quietly. She was pale and delicate, with an artist's hands currently stained with paint. 300 years of being feared and hated and hunted. 300 years of searching for pieces of a soul that was scattered by a cruel witch. Can you imagine that kind of isolation? Rosalie wanted to argue, wanted to insist that the monster who destroyed her life deserved isolation. But the words stuck in her throat, because these women, these real, breathing, obviously unharmed women were making it very difficult to cling to her certainty. He didn't order the attack on my village, she said instead. That's what he claims, that someone else killed my family to make me hate him, to turn me into an assassin. The women exchanged glances, something passing between them that Rosalie couldn't read. We've heard rumors, Alicia said carefully. She was middle-aged, with intelligent eyes and a scholar's bearing. There's someone working against the king, someone powerful who doesn't want the curse broken. We don't know who, but there have been incidents. Attacks blamed on the king that he never ordered. Villages raised in his name by wolves that weren't his pack. Why? Rosalie asked. Why would anyone want to keep him cursed? Power, Eunice said bluntly. With the king trapped in his curse, unable to produce heirs or form alliances through marriage, the noble houses have been circling like vultures for decades. If he breaks the curse, becomes fully human again, he'll consolidate his power, marry his true mate, produce heirs. The political landscape would shift dramatically. Mia nodded. Someone benefits from keeping him exactly as he is, isolated, feared, unable to rule effectively because everyone sees him as a monster rather than a king. Rosalie's mind raced. Could it be true? Could her parents' deaths have been nothing more than collateral damage in someone else's political game? The rage that had sustained her for 3 years suddenly felt hollow, empty. I came here to kill him, she whispered. I've spent 3 years training, planning, preparing. Everything I've done has been for revenge. We know, Tiffany said gently. We can see it in your eyes, the same fury that drove some of us here. She reached across and squeezed Rosalie's hand. But revenge won't bring them back. It won't heal the wound. It'll just create new wounds that never stop bleeding. Then what do I do? The question came out broken. Lost. If he's not my enemy, if someone else murdered my family, then what do I do with all this anger? You use it, Kelly said fiercely. You channel it into finding the real killer, into helping the king break this curse, into making sure no one else loses their family the way you lost yours. And if I can't? Rosalie asked. If I'm not strong enough, or brave enough, or you are. Mia's voice was absolute. You walked into a monster's castle wearing a dress full of daggers. You stared down a Lycan king and demanded answers. You're exactly strong enough. She smiled. You're the 8th fragment, Rosalie. That means you're part of something larger than revenge. Something that could change everything. Rosalie looked around at these 7 women, these survivors who'd become something more than victims. They'd built a community here, in the shadow of a curse. They'd found purpose in the most unlikely place. Could she do the same? Could she let go of her rage long enough to see the truth? The door opened, and the king stood in the threshold. His amber eyes found hers immediately, and she saw the question there. Will you stay? Will you help me? Or will you run? Rosalie stood, her legs trembling but her voice steady. I'll stay, she said. But not as your prisoner. Not as a fragment of some ancient curse. She lifted her chin, meeting his gaze directly. I'll stay as your partner. We're going to find out who really killed my family, and then we're going to make them pay. Something flickered in his expression, surprise perhaps, or hope. Partners, he repeated slowly. I can accept those terms. Good. She moved toward him, and the women behind her murmured encouragement. Because you're going to teach me everything you know about tracking killers, Your Majesty, and I'm going to help you find your final fragment. His smile was small but genuine. Then, let's begin. Rosalie Price. We have much work to do. Chapter 4. The Blood Moon Prophecy. The king's study was a sanctuary of leather and shadows. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves groaned under the weight of ancient tomes, their spines cracked and faded with age. Maps covered every available surface, some showing territories Rosalie recognized, others depicting lands that no longer existed. A massive desk dominated the center of the room, littered with documents, correspondence, and what looked like investigative reports. This wasn't the lair of a monster. It was the workshop of a man trying to solve an impossible puzzle. "Sit," the king said, gesturing to a chair near the fireplace. He moved to a cabinet and pulled out a bottle of amber liquid. "You'll want this. The truth is easier to swallow with whiskey." Rosalie hesitated, then accepted the glass he offered. The liquid burned going down, but it steadied her nerves. "I need to know everything. Starting with your name." He paused mid-pour of his own drink. "My name? Everyone calls you the king, or your majesty. But you had a name once, before the curse, before all of this." She met his eyes. "If we're partners, I should know what to call you." For a moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he set down the bottle and spoke a word in a language she didn't recognize, something ancient and beautiful and sad. "That was my birth name," he said quietly. "But it belongs to a prince who died 300 years ago, the man I am now." He considered. "The man I am now goes by Felix. Felix Barker, a common name for a common monster." "You're not common," Rosalie said before she could stop herself. "And I don't think you're a monster either." His expression softened. "Give it time. You've only known me for a few hours." "I've known you for 3 years," she corrected. "Or at least, I thought I did. I studied every story, every rumor, every whispered tale about the Lycan king. I built an entire mythology around you in my head." She took another sip of whiskey. "Turns out I was wrong about almost everything." Felix moved to the desk, pulling out a thick leather-bound journal. 3 years ago, Riverside Village was attacked on the night of October 13th, a Tuesday. The wolves came at midnight, wearing black banners with my sigil. They killed everyone they could find except you. He opened the journal, revealing page after page of meticulous notes. "But here's what doesn't make sense. That same night, I was 300 miles north, negotiating a treaty with the mountain clans. I have 40 witnesses who can confirm my presence. There's no possible way I could have ordered that attack." Rosalie leaned forward, studying the journal. His handwriting was precise, almost obsessive. Dates, times, locations, witness statements, all documented with the care of someone desperate to prove his innocence. "Someone impersonated your authority," she said slowly. "But who has that kind of power? Who could command a lycanthrope pack and make them follow orders using your name?" "That's the question I've been trying to answer for 3 years." Felix pulled out more documents, reports from other villages, testimonies from survivors, even sketches of the attacking wolves. Riverside wasn't the only target. In the past 5 years, there have been 7 similar attacks. Different villages, different circumstances, but always the same pattern. Wolves bearing my sigil, brutal efficiency, and at least one survivor left behind to spread the tale of the Lycan King's cruelty. He spread the reports across the desk, and Rosalie saw the pattern immediately. Each attack had been calculated to cause maximum damage while maintaining just enough restraint to leave witnesses. This wasn't random violence. This was psychological warfare. "Someone is building a narrative," she whispered, "making sure everyone fears and hates you." "Yes." Felix's jaw tightened. "And it's working. Villages that once paid tribute willingly now do so out of terror. Noble houses that were neutral now actively plot against me. My own people, humans who live in my territories, see me as a tyrant rather than their king." He looked at her, and the pain in his eyes was raw. "I've spent 3 centuries trying to be better than the curse that made me. But none of it matters if everyone believes I'm a monster anyway." Rosalie felt something twist in her chest, not quite sympathy, but understanding. She knew what it was like to be defined by something beyond your control. To have your identity stripped away and replaced with a story written by someone else's hatred. "Show me the survivor testimonies," she said. "Maybe there's something everyone missed." They spent the next hour poring over documents. Rosalie read account after account of terror, describing wolves with yellow eyes and cruel intelligence, attacks that came without warning, families torn apart in moments. The details were consistent, too consistent, almost like a script being followed. Then she found it. Felix. Her voice was sharp. Look at this. She laid out 3 testimonies, side-by-side survivors from 3 different villages, attacked 2 years apart. They all described the same wolf. A massive gray beast with a scar across its left eye, leading the pack, giving orders in growls that sounded almost like human speech. Felix leaned closer, his breath warm against her neck. That's impossible. Lycanthropes don't live long enough to participate in attacks years apart. We age differently than humans, but we're not immortal. An alpha might live 50 years at most. Unless it's not a lycanthrope, Rosalie said slowly. What if it's something else? Something that can take wolf form but isn't bound by normal lycanthrope limitations. His eyes widened. A shifter. Not cursed, but naturally born with the ability to change forms. He straightened, running a hand through his hair. That would explain everything. The consistency across attacks, the ability to command regular lycanthropes, the intelligence behind the targeting. He turned to her, and there was something almost like excitement in his expression. Rosalie, you might have just cracked the pattern that's eluded me for years. She felt a flush of pride at his words, then immediately suppressed it. She wasn't here for his approval. She was here for justice. So we're looking for a shifter, she said. Someone with access to your sigils, knowledge of your movements, and enough power to command lycanthrope packs. That narrows it down to someone in my inner circle, Felix finished grimly. Someone I trust. The implications hung heavy in the air. If the killer was someone close to the king, someone with authority and access, then they'd been operating under his nose for years, manipulating events, destroying lives, all while maintaining a facade of loyalty. Who has access to your sigils? Rosalie asked. Felix moved to a cabinet and pulled out a wooden box. Inside were several wax seals, each carved with the black wolf symbol. These are kept under lock and key. Only 3 people have access. Myself, Lenore Lyons, my castellan, and my captain of the guard, Nelson Wallace. Tell me about them. Lenore has served my household for 60 years. She was already ancient when I hired her, a witch who traded her immortality for protection from those who would hunt her. She's cold, efficient, and absolutely loyal. He picked up one of the seals, turning it over in his hands. Nelson has been my captain for 20 years. He's a lycanthrope, turned young and trained in my guard. He's saved my life more times than I can count. People can change, Rosalie said quietly. Especially over decades. Especially when power and politics are involved. Felix was silent for a long moment. You're right. Trust isn't proof of innocence. He set down the seal. Tomorrow we'll begin investigating both of them, carefully. If either discovers what we're doing before we have proof, they'll disappear, Rosalie finished. Or worse, accelerate whatever endgame they have planned. Exactly. He turned to her, his expression serious. This is dangerous, Rosalie. More dangerous than you realize. If we're right, if someone in my inner circle has been orchestrating these attacks, then they have the power to destroy both of us. They could stage another attack, blame it on me, have me executed by my own people. They could make you disappear like the other brides were supposed to. I'm not afraid of danger, she said, lifting her chin. I came here prepared to die if it meant taking you down with me. Investigating a traitor is nothing compared to that. His smile was small but genuine. You're either very brave or very foolish. Both, probably. She stood, moving to the window. Outside, the moon hung fat and silver in the sky, bathing the mountains in ghostly light. The women in the West Tower, are they safe? If there's a traitor in the castle, could they be in danger? They're protected by wards that I maintain personally. No one can enter the West Tower without my explicit permission. He joined her at the window, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. But you're right to be concerned. If our investigation reveals too much, the traitor might try to eliminate witnesses, or hostages. A chill ran down Rosalie's spine. She'd just met those women, but already she felt protective of them. They'd welcomed her, shared their stories, offered friendship without reservation. The thought of them being hurt because of her investigation made her stomach turn. We need to be smart about this, she said. Gather evidence without alerting the traitor. Build an airtight case before we make any accusations. Agreed. Felix pulled a document from his desk, a schedule of some kind. There's a blood moon in 3 days. A rare celestial event that happens once every 70 years. According to the original curse, it's one of the few times when the fragments can be fully awakened to their true purpose. Rosalie frowned. What does that mean? It means, he said carefully, that during the blood moon, your connection to the other fragments will strengthen. You'll be able to sense them, communicate with them on a deeper level, and if we can gather all 9 fragments together during the blood moon. He paused. There's a small chance that we could break the curse early, without finding the 9th fragment. Her heart skipped. How? The curse requires all 9 pieces of my mate's soul to reunite, but the blood moon creates a temporary bridge between the fragments, a way for the 8 existing pieces to amplify each other's power. If we can channel that combined energy correctly, we might be able to complete the soul even without the final piece. His expression was cautious, almost afraid to hope. It's risky. The texts warn of consequences if the ritual fails, but it might be our only chance. What kind of consequences? Rosalie asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. Felix's jaw tightened. The curse could become permanent, unbreakable. I would remain trapped between forms forever, and the fragments. He looked away. The fragments could be consumed by the curse, their souls fractured beyond repair. The weight of his words settled over her like a heavy cloak. If they failed, not only would Felix remain cursed, but Mia, Eunice, Kelly, Tiffany, Millie, Neva, Alicia, all of them could be destroyed. Their souls shattered as punishment for attempting to circumvent the witch's curse. That's not a risk we can take, Rosalie said firmly. Not until we've exhausted every other option. Not until we've found the 9th fragment. Felix turned to her, and something in his eyes made her breath catch. You barely know these women. You could walk away right now. Leave this castle. Forget any of this happened. Why would you risk yourself to protect them? Because they're innocent, she said simply. They didn't ask for this curse. They didn't ask to be fragments of someone else's soul. They deserve better than being sacrificed in a desperate gamble. She held his gaze. And so do you. For a moment, neither of them moved. The air between them felt charged, electric, like the moment before lightning strikes. Then Felix stepped back, breaking the spell. 3 days until the blood moon, he said, his voice rougher than before. 3 days to find evidence against the traitor, locate the 9th fragment, and decide our next move. He looked at her. Can you do this, Rosalie? Can you hunt the monster who killed your family while living in a castle full of suspects? She thought of her parents, their faces blurred by time and grief. She thought of her grandmother, whispering about love conquering all even as the wolves howled outside. She thought of 3 years spent sharpening herself into a weapon, only to discover she'd been aimed at the wrong target. Yes, she said, I can do this. Felix nodded slowly. Then we begin tomorrow. For tonight, you should rest. There are guest chambers prepared for you. No, she surprised herself with the word. If someone in this castle wants me dead, I'm not sleeping alone in some isolated room. I'll stay in the West Tower with the other women. Safety, in numbers. His expression flickered with something that might have been respect. Smart. I'll have guards posted outside the tower entrance. No one enters or leaves without my knowledge. Good. She moved toward the door, then paused. Felix? Yes? Thank you for telling me the truth, for giving me a chance to find real justice instead of empty revenge. She met his eyes. I know you didn't have to. His smile was sad and ancient. You deserve the truth, Rosalie Price, even if it's more complicated than the simple story of monsters and heroes. He turned back to his documents. Sleep well. Tomorrow, the real hunt begins. As Rosalie left the study and made her way back to the West Tower, she couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. The blood moon was coming. A traitor walked these halls, and somewhere out there, a 9th fragment waited to be found. 3 days to solve a mystery 300 years in the making. 3 days to decide whether to trust a cursed king or cling to her hatred. 3 days until everything came to a head under a bleeding moon. She only hoped it would be enough. Chapter 5. The Captain's Secret. Morning arrived, wrapped in mist and suspicion. Rosalie woke to the sound of whispered conversations floating up from the main floor of the West Tower. She'd slept in a small but comfortable chamber on the second level, the bed soft enough that she'd actually managed a few hours of rest despite the turmoil in her mind. She dressed quickly in the clothes that had been laid out for her, a simple burgundy dress with practical sleeves and sturdy boots. No more wedding gown. No more pretense of being a blushing bride. Today she was a hunter. Downstairs, the other women were gathered around the breakfast table. Mia looked up as Rosalie descended, her blue eyes knowing. "The king sent word early this morning," she said, pouring tea. "You're to meet him in the training yard after breakfast. Something about assessing your combat skills." Kelly grinned over her porridge. "He's going to test you. See if you're as dangerous as you think you are." "I stabbed 3 men during my journey here," Rosalie said flatly, accepting the tea. "I think I've proven my capability." 3 ordinary men, Eunice corrected gently. "Felix wants to know if you can hold your own against supernatural threats. Against lycanthropes. Against whatever we might face in the coming days." Rosalie sat down, her stomach too knotted with nerves to eat much. "What do you know about Nelson Wallace? The captain of the guard?" The women exchanged glances, careful, measured looks that told Rosalie they'd discussed this very topic before. "Nelson is," Alicia chose her words carefully, "complicated. He's loyal to the king. That much is certain. But he's also ambitious. He wants to prove that lycanthropes can be more than just soldiers and servants. He dreams of a world where our kind has real political power." "Our kind?" Rosalie's eyes widened. "You're a lycanthrope?" Alicia nodded. "Turned 20 years ago by a rogue wolf. Felix found me half dead in the forest and gave me a choice. Join his guard or be executed as per kingdom law. I chose service." Her expression was complicated. "He saved my life. But that doesn't mean I trust everyone in his employ." "Do you trust Nelson?" Rosalie asked directly. "I did." Alicia's hesitation was telling. "But recently, he's been different. More secretive. He disappears for hours without explanation. And last month, I saw him arguing with someone in the lower dungeons, someone I didn't recognize. When I asked him about it later, he claimed I was mistaken. That I hadn't seen anything." Rosalie's pulse quickened. "Did you tell Felix?" "No." Alicia looked guilty. "Nelson has been the king's right hand for 2 decades. Making accusations without proof would only cause division. And if I'm wrong, if I'm seeing shadows where there are none." She shook her head. "It could destroy the fragile trust that holds this castle together." "But if you're right," Rosalie said quietly, "and Nelson is the traitor, then we're all in danger." Mia set down her teacup with deliberate care. "Which is why you need to be careful today, Rosalie. If Nelson suspects you're investigating him, if he realizes Felix has doubts." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. "I'll be careful," Rosalie promised, "but I won't back down. Someone murdered my family. If it was Nelson, I'll find proof, and then I'll make sure he pays." The training yard was a vast courtyard behind the castle, surrounded by high stone walls. Combat dummies lined one side, weapons racks the other. In the center, Felix stood with another man, tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair shot through with silver and eyes that gleamed amber even in daylight. Nelson Wallace. The captain. He turned as Rosalie approached, and his smile was all teeth. "So you're the new bride, the assassin bride, if the rumors are true." He circled her slowly, assessing. "You don't look like much. Skinny thing. Pretty face though. I can see why the king is interested." Felix's expression darkened. "That's enough, Nelson. I'm just being honest, Your Majesty." Nelson's tone was respectful, but carried an undercurrent of something else. Challenge, perhaps, or resentment. "If she's going to be involved in castle security, I need to know she won't be a liability." "Then test me," Rosalie said, meeting his gaze directly. "Stop talking, and show me what you've got, Captain." Nelson's grin widened. "Oh, I like her. She's got fire." He moved to the weapons rack and selected 2 wooden practice swords, tossing one to Rosalie. "Let's see if you can back up that attitude." Rosalie caught the sword, testing its weight. It was heavier than the daggers she was used to, but balanced well enough. She fell into a defensive stance, one her grandmother had taught her years ago, before the wolves came. Interesting form, Nelson observed, circling. That's not kingdom training. Where'd you learn to fight? My grandmother, Rosalie said. She was from the old country. Before the wars. Something flickered in Nelson's expression. Recognition? Interest? It was gone before she could identify it. Then he attacked. He was fast. Impossibly fast. The wooden blade came at her in a blur, and Rosalie barely managed to parry. The impact sent shocks up her arms, nearly knocking the sword from her grip. Too slow, Nelson barked, pressing his advantage. A lycanthrope won't give you time to think. You react or you die. Rosalie gritted her teeth and focused. Block, dodge, parry. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her mind. Flow like water, strike like lightning. She let Nelson's momentum carry him forward, then sidestepped at the last moment. His sword whistled through empty air, and she brought her blade up toward his exposed ribs. He caught it. With his bare hand. Better, he admitted, releasing her sword. You've got instincts, but instincts won't save you from teeth and claws. Then teach me, Rosalie said, breathing hard. Show me how to fight something stronger and faster than I am. Nelson glanced at Felix, who nodded. She needs to know. If she's staying, if she's part of this, she needs proper training. Fine. Nelson turned back to Rosalie. Lesson 1. Lycanthropes are predictable. We're stronger and faster, yes, but we rely on those advantages. We charge straight in, overwhelming our opponents with brute force. He demonstrated with a rush forward, and Rosalie scrambled back. Your advantage is that you're small, quick. You can move in ways we can't. For the next hour, Nelson put her through brutal drills, teaching her to dodge, to roll, to use an opponent's momentum against them. By the end, Rosalie was drenched in sweat and covered in bruises, but she'd also landed 3 solid hits on the captain, something that made his eyebrows rise with respect. You'll do, he said finally. Keep training daily, and you might actually survive what's coming. What's coming? Rosalie asked, seizing the opening. Nelson's expression shuddered. The usual threats, rogue wolves, political enemies, the occasional idiot who thinks killing the king will make them a hero. His eyes found hers. Or the occasional idiot who thinks they can assassinate him in his own castle. Rosalie held his gaze. I'm not an idiot, Captain. I'm a survivor. There's a difference. Is there? He stepped closer, his voice dropping. Because from where I stand, you're a village girl who got lucky, who survived when everyone else died. And now you're playing at being a warrior, thinking you can somehow make a difference in a world you don't understand. Nelson. Felix's voice was sharp. Warning. But Rosalie raised a hand. It's fine. She moved closer to Nelson, tilting her head back to meet his eyes. You're right. I don't understand this world. But I understand loss. I understand pain. And I understand that someone in this castle is lying about who they are and what they want. She let the words hang in the air. The question is, who? For a moment, something dangerous flashed in Nelson's eyes. Then it was gone, replaced by his easy smile. Good question. When you find out, let me know. I'd love to meet another survivor. He turned and walked away, leaving Rosalie alone with Felix in the training yard. That was risky, Felix said quietly. Confronting him like that, I needed to see his reaction. Rosalie watched Nelson disappear into the castle. Did you catch it? When I mentioned my grandmother teaching me to fight? His expression changed. Like he recognized something. Felix's jaw tightened. The old country fighting style. It's rare now. Most of those techniques died out during the wars. He looked at her. Your grandmother, what was her full name? Evelyn, Rosalie said. Evelyn Rocha. She came to Riverside when I was born. Said she needed to be close to family. But she never talked about her life before. A thought struck her. Felix. What if my grandmother wasn't just some random woman from the old country? What if she knew about the curse? About the fragments? Felix's eyes widened. That would mean I didn't survive that attack by chance. Rosalie finished. My grandmother protected me specifically. Because she knew I was a fragment. Because she knew you'd eventually find me. The implications crashed over them both. If Rosalie's grandmother had known about the curse, if she'd deliberately positioned herself to protect one of the fragments, then there was a much larger conspiracy at play. Someone had been orchestrating events for decades, maybe centuries, trying to either break the curse or ensure it remained intact. We need to search your grandmother's belongings, Felix said urgently. Did she leave anything behind? Journals, letters, heirlooms. Rosalie's mind raced. There was a chest. A locked chest she kept under her bed. After she died, I couldn't bring myself to open it. I buried it with the rest of my family's possessions in the ruins of our house. Then we dig it up. Felix was already moving toward the castle. Tonight, under cover of darkness. If your grandmother left clues about the conspiracy, about who really ordered the attack, Your Majesty. A guard came running across the courtyard, his face pale. There's been an incident. In the village of Thornwick. Another attack. Felix froze. When? Last night. The wolves came at midnight wearing your sigil. 23 dead, 5 wounded. The guard's voice shook. And they left a message, sire. Written in blood on the village elder's house. What did it say? Rosalie demanded. The guard's eyes found hers, and she saw fear there. Raw, primal fear. It said, "The 8th fragment will burn. The blood moon will run red. Long live the true king." Silence fell over the courtyard like a shroud. Someone knew. Someone knew that Rosalie was the 8th fragment. Someone knew about the blood moon ritual. And they were threatening to destroy everything before Felix and Rosalie could uncover the truth. Thornwick is only 20 miles from here, Felix said, his voice deadly calm. We can reach it by nightfall if we leave now. We? Rosalie asked. You and I. His eyes glowed with barely contained rage. If someone is threatening you specifically, if they know you're the 8th fragment, then they're close. Very close. And they're getting bolder. He turned to the guard. Assemble a small group. 6 of our most trusted soldiers. We ride within the hour. Sire, is that wise? The guard protested. If this is a trap, then we'll spring it. Felix's smile was all predator. And we'll see who's really pulling the strings in my kingdom. As the guard rushed off to follow orders, Rosalie grabbed Felix's arm. This is exactly what they want. To draw you out. To separate you from the castle's defenses. I know. His expression was grim. But we can't ignore this. They murdered 23 people and threatened you directly. If we don't respond, if we don't investigate, we lose whatever small amount of credibility I have left. He covered her hand with his. Besides, you wanted to hunt the monster who killed your family. This is your chance. The wolves at Thornwick might lead us straight to them. Rosalie's heart hammered. He was right. This was what she'd wanted, a chance to confront her family's killers. But now that the moment was here, she felt the weight of it pressing down on her shoulders. 23 more dead. How many more would die before they stopped this? I'm coming with you, she said firmly. And I'm bringing every dagger I own. Felix's smile was fierce and proud. I wouldn't have it any other way, partner. Within the hour they were mounted and riding through the castle gates. Felix on a massive black stallion. Rosalie on a smaller but swift mare. Behind them rode 6 guards, all lycanthropes, all loyal to the king. Or so they claimed. As the castle disappeared behind them, and the road stretched ahead toward Thornwick, Rosalie couldn't shake the feeling that they were riding straight into a trap, that someone in their small party was waiting for the perfect moment to strike. She touched the daggers hidden beneath her riding cloak and made herself a promise. Whoever had killed her family, whoever was orchestrating these attacks, whoever threatened the women in the West Tower, she would find them, and she would make them bleed. Chapter 6. The Burning Village. The smell hit them first, smoke and death, carried on the wind like a curse. Thornwick had been a prosperous village once. Rosalie could see evidence of it in the well-maintained road leading into the settlement, the sturdy fences that marked property lines, the communal well at the town center. But prosperity meant nothing when wolves came calling. Bodies lay in the streets. Rosalie had seen death before her own village had looked much like this 3 years ago. But knowing what to expect didn't make it easier. An elderly man slumped against his doorway, throat torn out. A young mother clutched her child, both of them still and cold. A blacksmith lay across his anvil, his hammer still gripped in his lifeless hand. 23 dead. The guard's count had been accurate. Felix dismounted slowly, his expression carved from stone. But Rosalie saw the way his hands trembled as he knelt beside the child's body. The way his jaw clenched so hard she thought his teeth might crack. They were asleep, he said quietly. Most of them never even made it out of their beds. This wasn't a battle. It was a massacre. Nelson moved through the carnage with professional efficiency, examining wounds and sniffing the air. The other guards fanned out, searching for survivors or clues. Rosalie followed Felix as he made his way toward the elder's house, the one where the message had been written. The words were still there, painted in blood across the whitewashed wall. The 8th fragment will burn. The blood moon will run red. Long live the true king. The true king, Rosalie whispered. Not you. Someone else claims your throne. Felix's eyes glowed amber, his fury barely contained. Someone who thinks they have a better right to rule. Someone who's willing to slaughter innocents to prove it. Your Majesty. Nelson appeared beside them, his expression grim. You need to see this. They followed him to the edge of the village, where the forest began. There, carved into the trunk of a massive oak tree, was a symbol, a wolf's head split in half by a jagged line. I've seen this before, Nelson said, his voice tight. 20 years ago, during the rebellion of the Silver Moon. It was the mark of a faction that wanted to overthrow the monarchy. They believed lycanthropes should rule themselves, without a king cursed or otherwise. Felix stepped closer to the tree, running his fingers over the carving. The Silver Moon Rebellion was crushed. Its leaders were executed. I watched them die myself. Maybe you didn't get all of them, Rosalie said. Or maybe someone survived and rebuilt the movement in secret. After 20 years? Nelson shook his head. That kind of patient revenge requires resources, organization, and absolute loyalty from followers. We're not talking about a few rogue wolves. We're talking about an entire network that's been operating under our noses for decades. A network. The word sent chills down Rosalie's spine. She'd been thinking of the enemy as a single person, one traitor in the castle, one mastermind pulling strings. But what if it was bigger than that? What if Nelson was right, and they were facing an organized rebellion with agents embedded throughout the kingdom? The message mentions me specifically, she said, studying the blood-painted words. How would a rebel faction know I'm the 8th fragment? That information should be restricted to people inside the castle. Felix and Nelson exchanged dark glances. Someone in our inner circle is feeding them information, Felix said flatly. Someone with access to the highest levels of castle security. Or, Rosalie added carefully, someone in our inner circle is them. What if the traitor isn't working for the rebellion? What if they're leading it? The implications hung heavy in the air. If a member of Felix's inner circle was actually the head of a rebel faction, then every decision, every strategy, every piece of intelligence was compromised. They weren't just fighting an external enemy. They were fighting a cancer that had taken root in the heart of the kingdom itself. We need to search for survivors, Felix said, changing the subject with visible effort. Someone might have seen something, hidden during the attack, witnessed who led the wolves. They split up, combing through houses and cellars. Rosalie found herself in a small cottage on the village's edge, searching through rooms that had been ransacked but not burned. The family who lived here had fought back. She could see evidence of struggle in overturned furniture and broken weapons. In the back bedroom, she found a child's toy, a wooden wolf, lovingly carved and painted. It reminded her of one her father had made for her when she was small. Before the world turned cruel, before monsters became real. Find anything? Felix appeared in the doorway, his presence filling the small space. Just ghosts, Rosalie said, setting down the toy. Did you find survivors? 3. Hiding in the root cellar beneath the tavern. They're traumatized but alive. His expression was haunted. One of them, a girl about your age, she saw the wolf that led the attack. She described him as massive, with gray fur and a scar across his left eye. Rosalie's pulse jumped. The same wolf from the other attacks, the one I found in the testimonies. Yes. Felix moved closer, his voice dropping. But she said something else. Something that changes everything. She said the scarred wolf spoke to her, in perfect human speech. He told her to deliver a message. What message? Felix's jaw tightened. He said, "Tell the false king that his time is ending. Tell him the curse will never be broken. Tell him that the 9th fragment is already dead." The words hit Rosalie like a physical blow. Dead? The 9th fragment is dead? If that's true, if the final piece of the puzzle has been destroyed, Felix's voice cracked slightly, then the curse can never be broken. I'll remain trapped in this form forever. And the 8 fragments, including you, will eventually be consumed by the curse's hunger. No, Rosalie grabbed his arms, forcing him to look at her. We don't know if it's true. This could be psychological warfare, trying to make us give up hope. Or it could be the truth, Felix said quietly. And we've been wasting time chasing a solution that died before we even began. Rosalie saw the despair in his eyes, 300 years of hope crumbling in a single moment. She wanted to comfort him, to promise that everything would be fine. But she'd learned long ago that pretty lies didn't heal real wounds. Then we used the blood moon ritual, she said firmly. You said there was a chance, a small chance, that the 8 existing fragments could complete the soul without the 9th. We take that chance. You'd risk yourself like that? Risk all the women in the West Tower? For a cursed king you barely know? I'd risk myself for the truth, Rosalie corrected. For justice. For the 23 people who died here tonight, and the 47 who died in my village. If breaking your curse means stopping these attacks, then yes, I'll take that risk. She met his eyes. But more than that, I believe the 9th fragment isn't dead. I think whoever's behind this wants us to believe that. Wants us to attempt the blood moon ritual and fail. Because if we fail, if the curse becomes permanent, then they win. You remain weak, divided, unable to consolidate power or produce heirs. Felix studied her face, something shifting in his expression. You're betting everything on instinct. I'm betting on logic, she countered. Why go through all this trouble, decades of attacks, elaborate conspiracies, murdering innocents just to tell us the 9th fragment is dead? If they wanted you permanently cursed, they'd say nothing. Let you search forever. The fact that they're trying to push us toward the ritual tells me they're afraid. Afraid we might actually find the 9th fragment and break the curse legitimately. Slowly, Felix nodded. You think like a hunter, like someone who understands predators. I was raised by one, Rosalie said, thinking of her grandmother. She taught me that the most dangerous lies are the ones wrapped in truth. And right now, someone is lying to us. We just need to figure out which parts are lies and which are truth. A commotion outside drew their attention. Nelson was shouting orders, and through the window, Rosalie saw flames erupting from the village center. They ran. The communal well was on fire, impossible, since wells were made of stone and water. But magical fire didn't follow natural rules. Silver flames danced across the well's surface, and in the heart of the blaze, Rosalie saw a figure. A woman, tall and elegant, with silver-streaked black hair. Lenore Lyons. Your Majesty. Lenore's voice carried across the burning square, cultured and cold as ever. I'm afraid I have a confession to make. Felix went rigid. Lenore. What are you doing here? Cleaning up loose ends, she gestured, and more figures emerged from the shadows. Wolves. At least a dozen of them, surrounding Felix's small guard. You've been getting too close, Felix. You and your little assassin bride. Asking uncomfortable questions. Making uncomfortable connections. Nelson drew his sword, the other guards following suit. But they were badly outnumbered, and everyone knew it. It was you, Rosalie breathed. You've been orchestrating the attacks. You're the traitor. Lenore's smile was all teeth. Traitor implies I was ever loyal. I've been working against you since the day I entered your service, Felix. 60 years of patience, building networks, placing agents, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. She stepped through the flames as if they were nothing, her crimson dress trailing behind her like spilled blood. And now, with the blood moon approaching, with all 8 fragments gathered in one convenient location, that moment has finally arrived. Why? Felix's voice was barely controlled. I gave you sanctuary. Protection. I trusted you. You cursed me. Lenore's composure cracked, revealing the rage beneath. You don't remember, do you? 300 years ago, when you were still a prince, when you made your bargain with the witch to save your sister. She laughed bitterly. I was that witch, Felix. I was the one who saved your sister's life. And I was the one you betrayed when you refused to pay the price we'd agreed upon. Rosalie's mind reeled. Lenore was the witch who'd cursed Felix? But that would make her over 300 years old, Lenore finished, reading Rosalie's expression. Yes, child. I gave up my mortality in that curse, bound myself to Felix's fate. If he breaks the curse and becomes human again, I die. The magic that keeps me alive unravels. Her eyes glittered with malice. So you see, I have a very personal interest in ensuring that curse remains intact forever. Felix's hands clenched into fists. The original bargain was unjust. You demanded my sister's life as payment after saving it. I couldn't let you take her. So you took everything from me instead. Lenore's shout echoed across the burning village. My power. My freedom. My future. You trapped us both in this endless dance, me maintaining the curse, you searching for a way to break it. Well, I'm done dancing. She raised her hands, and the silver flames grew higher. Tonight, the 8th fragment burns. The other 7 will follow, and you, Felix, will spend the rest of eternity knowing that your hope died here, in this miserable village, because you were too blind to see the enemy standing beside you for 60 years. The wolves moved forward, closing in. Rosalie drew her daggers, the wolfsbane poison gleaming on the blades. Beside her, Felix began to change his form, rippling, bones cracking and reforming. The curse taking hold. Run, he growled, his voice already more beast than man. Rosalie, run. But Rosalie had spent 3 years preparing for this moment. 3 years, sharpening herself into a weapon, and she was done running from monsters. No, she said firmly, stepping forward. We fight. And as the wolves charged and silver fire rained down from the sky, Rosalie Price discovered exactly how much damage one determined assassin could do when she finally stopped running from her nightmares and started hunting them instead. Chapter 7, The Beast Unleashed. The transformation was terrible and beautiful. Felix's body convulsed, muscles rippling and expanding beneath his skin. Bones cracked and reformed with sounds like breaking timber. His face elongated into a muzzle filled with razor-sharp teeth, and his hands became massive paws tipped with claws that could tear through stone. Dark fur erupted across his body, and his eyes, those amber eyes, blazed with primal fury. He was magnificent, terrifying, more monster than man, and he was protecting her. The first wolf that lunged at Rosalie never reached her. Felix intercepted it mid-leap, his jaws closing around its throat with crushing force. Blood sprayed across the burning square as the wolf went limp. He threw the body aside and roared a sound that made the earth tremble and the remaining wolves hesitate. Impressive, Lenore said from her position near the well. But you're still outnumbered. Still fighting against impossible odds. And every moment you spend in that form drains you. How long can you maintain it, I wonder? An hour? 2? Before the curse consumes you completely? Rosalie didn't waste time with words. She moved. Years of training guided her body as she rolled beneath a leaping wolf, came up slashing with her daggers. The wolf's bane-coated blade bit deep into the creature's flank, and it howled in agony as the poison burned through its system. She kept moving, never staying still, never presenting an easy target. Flow like water, strike like lightning. Her grandmother's words were a prayer and a battle cry. Nelson fought beside her, his sword singing through the air. But even he was struggling against the sheer numbers. One of Felix's guards went down, screaming as wolves tore into him. Then another. The battle was turning against them. Fall back to the tavern, Nelson shouted. We need defensible positions. But Lenore raised her hands, and the tavern exploded in silver flames, then the blacksmith's shop. Then the houses on either side of the square. One by one, every building that could offer shelter or escape went up in magical fire. There's nowhere to run, Lenore called out, her voice carrying over the chaos. Nowhere to hide. You'll burn here, all of you. And the kingdom will believe it was the Lycan king's own madness that destroyed this village, that he finally lost control and slaughtered his own people. Rosalie's mind raced. They were trapped in an open square, surrounded by fire and wolves, with a witch who'd spent 300 years planning this moment. They needed an advantage. A weapon. Something Lenore wouldn't expect. The child's toy. The wooden wolf she'd found in the cottage. It was insane. It couldn't possibly work. But Rosalie had learned that magic followed rules, ancient rules based on symbolism and sacrifice. And if Lenore's curse was bound to Felix through a bargain, through debt and betrayal, then maybe. "Felix," she shouted, dodging another wolf. "The original bargain. What exactly did you promise Lenore?" His beast form didn't answer with words, but she saw his ears flick toward her. He was listening even as he fought. "It matters," she pressed. "The exact words matter with curses." Lenore's expression flickered just for a moment, but it was enough. Fear. The witch was afraid of what Rosalie might uncover. "I promised her my firstborn." Felix's voice came out distorted, half growl. "In exchange for my sister's life, I promised her my firstborn child." "And you never had children," Rosalie said, pieces clicking together. "Because the curse made you unable to produce heirs. So the bargain was never fulfilled or broken, it's just suspended. Waiting." "Clever girl," Lenore hissed. "But understanding the mechanics of a curse doesn't give you the power to break it." "No," Rosalie agreed. "But it gives me leverage." She reached into her pocket and pulled out the wooden wolf toy, the one she'd grabbed on instinct from the cottage. A family tree of some kind. "This belonged to the village elder's family," she said, holding it up so Lenore could see. 3 generations carved into the wood. A symbolic representation of legacy, of children and debt and promises kept. She met Lenore's eyes. "If Felix's firstborn was promised to you, and that debt remains unpaid, then the curse is incomplete, imperfect, and imperfect magic can be challenged." Lenore's face twisted with rage. "You think a child's toy gives you power over 300-year-old magic?" "I think symbols matter," Rosalie countered. "And I think you're terrified because I'm right." She threw the wooden wolf into the silver flames, consuming the well. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the flames turned from silver to gold, warm and bright instead of cold and consuming. The fire that had been destroying the village began to change, to shift, becoming something else entirely. Lenore screamed. The golden light spread outward from the well, washing over the square. Where it touched wolves, they transformed, not dying but changing back into human form. Confused, frightened humans who stumbled and fell, suddenly naked and vulnerable without their fur. "What have you done?" Lenore shrieked, her composure completely shattered. "What have you done?" "I reminded the magic what it's supposed to be," Rosalie said, though truthfully, she had no idea if that was accurate. She'd acted on instinct, on patterns she'd glimpsed in her grandmother's teachings. Curses are contracts, and contracts can be renegotiated. The golden light reached Felix, and Rosalie watched in awe as his beast form rippled. He didn't revert to human, not completely, but the savagery in his eyes dimmed, replaced by intelligence and control. He was still enormous, still covered in fur and claws, but he was Felix again, not just the beast. He turned to Lenore, and his growl was filled with very human fury. The witch backed away, fear finally cracking her cold facade. "You can't kill me. If I die, the curse becomes permanent. Felix remains trapped." "I know," Felix said, his voice rough but understandable. "Which is why you're going to help us break it. Properly. Without any more innocent blood." "Never." Lenore's hands moved in complex patterns, summoning more magic, but the golden light from the well interfered, disrupting her spells. "I'll die before I give you your freedom." "That can be arranged," Nelson said coldly, his sword at her throat. He'd moved with lycanthrope speed while she was distracted, getting behind her defenses. "But the king said help us, not die for us. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to explain how to properly break the curse, and then you're going to spend the rest of your immortal life in a cell, thinking about what you've done." Lenore's laugh was bitter. "The 9th fragment is beyond your reach, has been for 3 years. You think I didn't plan for this? Didn't prepare for every possibility?" Rosalie's blood ran cold. "What did you do?" "I made sure the 9th fragment would never be found." Lenore's smile was vicious despite the sword at her throat. I made sure that even if Felix somehow gathered the other 8, even if he survived my attempts to kill him, he would never complete the puzzle. Her eyes found Rosalie's. Your grandmother understood. In the end, she understood what needed to be done. My grandmother? Rosalie's voice shook. What does she have to do with? And then she knew. The truth crashed over her like a wave of ice water. No, she whispered. No, that's not possible. But Lenore's expression told her it was. Her grandmother Evelyn Rocha, who'd appeared in Riverside just after Rosalie was born, who'd taught her the old fighting styles, who'd protected her during the attack with her dying breath. Her grandmother had been the 9th fragment. She knew what she was, Lenore said, reading Rosalie's horror. I visited her years ago, told her what she carried inside her soul, offered her a deal, let me extract the fragment peacefully, or watch her family burn. She refused. Said she'd rather die than help me keep Felix cursed. The witch's smile turned cruel. So I arranged for her to die anyway. The attack on Riverside, it was never about terrorizing you or framing Felix. It was about eliminating the 9th fragment before she could be found and used. Rosalie couldn't breathe. Her grandmother hadn't just been protecting her during that attack. She'd been protecting the secret of what she was, sacrificing herself to ensure the curse could never be broken on Lenore's terms. But fragments don't die when the host dies, Felix said slowly, understanding dawning. The soul piece transfers. It has to go somewhere. Yes, Lenore hissed. It transfers to the nearest bloodline, to the closest genetic match. Her eyes locked on Rosalie. It transferred to you, girl. You're not just the 8th fragment. You're the 9th as well. You carry both pieces, your own and your grandmother's. Which means if you die, the curse becomes unbreakable. And if you're used in the blood moon ritual. She laughed. Well, you'll burn from the inside out. 2 fragments in one body creates a resonance that human flesh can't contain. The ritual will tear you apart. The square fell silent except for the crackling of dying flames. Rosalie looked down at her hands as if seeing them for the first time. 2 fragments. She was carrying 2 pieces of Felix's mate's soul. No wonder she'd survived the attack. No wonder the wolves had left her alive. Lenore hadn't wanted her dead, then she'd wanted her to suffer, to become the very weapon used against Felix. We can still do the ritual, Felix said quietly, moving closer in his half-beast form. Even knowing the risk. No. Rosalie's voice was firm despite the terror coursing through her. If what she says is true, if the ritual would kill me, then we find another way. There is no other way, Lenore shrieked. I've won. Even in defeat, even captured, I've won. The curse remains. Felix stays trapped. And you, little girl carrying 2 fragments, you'll live every day knowing that you're the reason he can never be free. Nelson's blade drew a thin line of blood across Lenore's throat. Shut up. But the damage was done. The truth had been spoken. Rosalie was the key to breaking the curse, and using that key would destroy her. Felix reached out with one massive paw, gently touching Rosalie's face. I won't let you sacrifice yourself. Not for me. Not for this curse. We'll find another way. What if there isn't another way? Rosalie asked, her voice breaking. What if this is it? What if the only path forward requires my death? Then the curse stays, Felix said simply. I've lived 300 years as a monster. I can live 300 more if it means you survive. Tears burned in Rosalie's eyes, not from sadness, but from the unfairness of it all. She'd come to this castle to kill a monster, and end up finding a man worth saving. She'd discovered fragments and curses and conspiracies, only to learn that she was the final piece, the impossible solution, the sacrifice that would break everything or fix nothing. The blood moon rises in 2 days, Nelson said grimly. We need to get back to the castle. Regroup. Figure out our options before time runs out. Felix nodded, still in his half-beast form. With Lenore captured and her wolves either dead or transformed back to confused humans, the immediate threat had passed, but the larger problem remained unsolved. How do you break a curse when the key to breaking it would destroy the very person you're trying to save? As they prepared to leave, Thornwick binding Lenore with iron chains that suppressed her magic, gathering their wounded, tending to the traumatized survivors, Rosalie made a decision. She would find a way. There had to be a way to break the curse without dying. Her grandmother had sacrificed herself to protect this secret. Rosalie would honor that sacrifice by finding the solution her grandmother never could, even if it meant facing impossible odds, even if it meant challenging 300 years of magic, even if it meant trusting a cursed king with her life, her soul, and both fragments burning inside her like twin flames. The blood moon was coming. And one way or another, everything would change beneath its crimson light. Chapter 8. The Prisoner's Bargain. The journey back to Blackthorn Castle was silent and tense. Lenore rode bound and gagged on a supply horse, her ice-chip eyes radiating hatred. The few guards who'd survived the attack were wounded but mobile, their expressions haunted by what they'd witnessed. Nelson rode at the front, his jaw tight, with barely contained fury, and Felix, still trapped in his half-beast form, unable to fully transform back, loped alongside the horses like a massive wolf, his amber eyes constantly scanning for threats. Rosalie rode in the middle of the formation, her mind churning. 2 fragments. She carried 2 pieces of a soul that had been scattered across 300 years. The knowledge sat heavy in her chest, a weight that had nothing to do with physical burden and everything to do with impossible responsibility. If you die, the curse becomes unbreakable. If you're used in the ritual, you'll burn from the inside out. Trapped. She was trapped just as surely as Felix had been trapped for centuries. Every path forward led to pain. Every solution demanded sacrifice. Her grandmother's face flickered through her memory, weathered and kind, always smelling of herbs and moonflowers. Had she known what carrying the fragment would mean? Had she spent Rosalie's entire childhood preparing her for this impossible choice? Love conquers all, her grandmother had whispered on cold nights. What a cruel thing to believe when love meant choosing between your own life and someone else's freedom. They reached the castle just before dawn. The gates opened immediately, and servants rushed out to tend the wounded. Lenore was dragged to the dungeons, the deep ones, where iron and salt lined the walls to suppress magic. Nelson personally oversaw her imprisonment, his expression grim. Felix finally transformed back to human form in the courtyard, collapsing to his knees with a groan. The change took everything from him, leaving him naked and trembling. Servants rushed forward with a cloak, and Rosalie looked away, giving him privacy even as her heart ached at the pain etched into his face. "Get him to his chambers," she ordered, surprising herself with the authority in her voice. "And send for healers. Everyone who fought tonight gets medical attention. That's not a request." The servants obeyed without question, recognizing something in her tone that demanded respect. Perhaps they saw it in her eyes, the weight of carrying 2 fragments, the knowledge of secrets that could reshape kingdoms, or perhaps they just saw a woman who'd stopped being afraid. An hour later, Rosalie stood in the West Tower, facing 7 anxious women who'd heard rumors of the attack and waited through the night for news. "It was Lenore," she said without preamble. "She's the witch who cursed Felix 300 years ago. She's been orchestrating everything, the attacks, the conspiracy, all of it, to keep the curse intact and ensure she stays immortal." Gasps echoed through the room. Mia's hand flew to her mouth. Eunice sank into a chair as if her legs would no longer hold her. "She's captured now," Rosalie continued. "Locked in the dungeons. But there's more." She took a breath, steadying herself. "My grandmother was the 9th fragment. When she died 3 years ago, her piece transferred to me. I'm carrying both the 8th and 9th fragments. Which means I'm the complete key to breaking the curse. And according to Lenore, using me in the blood moon ritual will kill me." The silence that followed was deafening. Then Kelly spoke, her voice fierce. "Then we don't do the ritual, we find another way." "What other way?" Alicia demanded. "We've all read the texts. The curse requires all 9 fragments united under a blood moon. There's no alternative mentioned, no backup plan. Because the witch who designed it didn't want a backup plan," Tiffany said bitterly. She wanted to ensure that even if Felix found all the pieces, he'd have to choose between his freedom and destroying an innocent person. "Lenore is cruel," Neva agreed softly. "But she's also brilliant. She's had 300 years to perfect her trap." Rosalie moved to the window, staring out at the mountains where the sun was just beginning to rise. "There has to be something we're missing, some loophole or exception. Curses are contracts, and contracts always have fine print. The original bargain," Mia said suddenly. Felix promised his firstborn to Lenore in exchange for his sister's life. But what if we fulfill that promise? What if we give her what she was owed? Felix has no children, Eunice pointed out. The curse made him unable to produce heirs. Not yet, Mia said, her eyes bright with possibility. But what if breaking the curse and fulfilling the bargain could happen simultaneously? What if the fragments all of us represent his children symbolically? We're pieces of his mate's soul, which means we're family in the most fundamental way. If we offer ourselves as payment, Lenore would just kill us. Rosalie interrupted gently. She's already tried. She doesn't want fulfillment of the bargain. She wants revenge. She wants Felix to suffer eternally. The hope in Mia's expression dimmed. We need to talk to her, Alicia said finally. Lenore. She's the only one who understands the curse completely. Maybe in exchange for leniency, for a less harsh imprisonment, she'd be willing to negotiate. She'd lie, Rosalie said, tell us whatever we want to hear, then betray us the moment she had the chance. Probably, Alicia agreed. But we're running out of time and options. The blood moon rises tomorrow night. If we're going to find a solution, we need to explore every possibility, even the ones that involve trusting our enemy. Rosalie knew Alicia was right. They were desperate, and desperate people made dangerous choices. But what other choice did they have? The dungeons of Blackthorn Castle were exactly what Rosalie expected: cold, dark, and oppressive. Iron bars lined with salt created cells that could hold even magical beings. Lenore sat in the deepest cell, still elegant despite her circumstances, her silver-streaked hair perfectly arranged. She smiled when Rosalie approached. Come to gloat? Or to beg? Neither. Rosalie pulled up a stool, sitting just outside the cell's reach. Felix stood behind her, human again but still weak from the transformation. Nelson guarded the entrance, his expression hostile. I came to negotiate. Lenore's laugh was sharp. You have nothing I want. I have your life, Rosalie said calmly. Right now the king is within his rights to execute you for treason, for murder, for 3 centuries of conspiracy. But if you help us find a way to break the curse without killing me, I'll argue for clemency, for imprisonment instead of death, for a chance at eventual parole. Parole? Lenore's eyebrows rose. In how many centuries? That depends on how helpful you are. The witch studied her for a long moment. You're not as naive as you look. There's steel in you. I can see why you carry 2 fragments. Your soul is strong enough to hold them both without shattering immediately. She leaned forward. But steel breaks under enough pressure, and the blood moon will apply pressure you can't imagine. Then tell me how to survive it, Rosalie said. There has to be a way. You designed this curse. You understand its mechanisms better than anyone. If there's a loophole, a workaround, any solution that doesn't end with my death, tell me. Lenore was silent for so long that Rosalie thought she wouldn't answer. Then, finally, the witch spoke. There is one possibility. One path that might allow you to survive the ritual. But it requires something most people aren't willing to give. What? Felix demanded, stepping forward. What does it require? Lenore's smile was cold. Trust. Complete, absolute trust between you and all 9 fragments. The ritual doesn't just unite the pieces of your mate's soul, Felix. It binds them to you permanently, creates an unbreakable connection between your essence and theirs. Most people can't surrender themselves that completely, can't let go of their individual identity enough to merge with another soul. Her eyes found Rosalie's. Can you, girl? Can you trust him enough to let him into every corner of your mind? Every memory, every secret, every shameful thought. Can you dissolve the boundaries of self and become something new? Rosalie's throat went dry. What Lenore was describing wasn't just intimacy. It was complete vulnerability. Total exposure. If I do that, she said carefully. If I trust him completely during the ritual, what happens? The fragments merge properly instead of burning you alive from the inside, Lenore said. The resonance between the 2 pieces you carry creates a bridge for the others to cross safely. You become the anchor point, the foundation on which Felix's mate's soul can fully reconstruct itself. She paused. But here's the catch. You won't be you anymore. Not entirely. You'll be part of something larger. part of the complete soul. Your personality, your memories, your identity, they'll blend with the other fragments. You might retain dominance, or you might dissolve entirely. There's no way to predict what remains when 9 become 1. Felix made a strangled sound. That's not a solution. That's asking her to die spiritually instead of physically. It's asking her to evolve, Lenore corrected. To become what she was always meant to be, part of your mate's complete soul. That was the point of scattering the fragments in the first place. To ensure that when they finally reunited, they would have lived full lives, gathered experiences and strength, become more than any single soul could be alone. She looked at Rosalie with something almost like respect. If you survive the merging, you'll be magnificent, more powerful than any ordinary human could imagine. But you'll also be changed irrevocably. The Rosalie Price who walks into that ritual won't be the same person who walks out. Rosalie stood slowly, her legs trembling. I need to think. I need time to. You have until moonrise tomorrow, Lenore said. After that, the blood moon passes and you'll have to wait another 70 years for the next opportunity. 3 more generations of suffering. 3 more generations of innocents dying in attacks designed to keep Felix weak and isolated. Her expression was unreadable. Choose wisely, girl. Some sacrifices are necessary. The question is, are you willing to make them? Rosalie turned and walked away, Felix following close behind. She could feel his distress, his desperate desire to argue, to find another solution. But what other solution existed? They'd run out of time. Out of options. Out of everything except one impossible choice. Keep her identity and doom everyone to more suffering. Or surrender herself and become something new, something powerful, something that might not even remember why Rosalie Price had mattered in the first place. That night, Rosalie stood on her balcony in the West Tower, staring at the moon. It was already tinged with red at the edges, the blood moon beginning its celestial transformation. Behind her, she heard footsteps. Felix appeared beside her, silent and solid and utterly heartbroken. Don't do it, he said quietly. Please, Rosalie. Don't sacrifice yourself for me. I'm not worth losing who you are. She turned to look at him, this man who'd been called a monster, who'd lived 300 years alone, who'd remained honorable despite every reason to become the villain everyone believed him to be. Maybe you are, she whispered. Maybe you're worth exactly that much. And as the blood moon rose higher, painting the world in shades of crimson, Rosalie Price made her choice. Chapter 9. The Blood Moon Rises. The ritual chamber was ancient, older than the castle itself, carved directly into the mountain's heart. Stone walls were covered in symbols that glowed faintly in the darkness, pulsing with magic that had existed long before kingdoms or curses. In the center of the chamber, a circular platform of black marble waited, surrounded by 9 smaller circles arranged like petals around a flower. 9 fragments, 9 positions, 1 impossible chance. Rosalie stood at the chamber's entrance, dressed in a simple white robe that felt disturbingly similar to a burial shroud. Around her, the other 7 women wore identical robes: Mia, Eunice, Kelly, Tiffany, Millie, Neva, and Alicia. They'd all agreed to participate despite the risks. Despite knowing that if the ritual failed, they might all die together. You don't have to do this, Mia said softly, squeezing Rosalie's hand. It's not too late to walk away. Yes, it is. Rosalie's voice was steady, though her heart hammered against her ribs. We all know what happens if the curse continues. More attacks, more innocent deaths, more centuries of suffering. She looked at each woman in turn. I won't let that happen, not when I have the power to stop it. Even if it costs you everything? Kelly asked, her green eyes bright with unshed tears. Especially then. Rosalie managed to smile. My grandmother taught me that some prices are worth paying. Some sacrifices make you more human, not less. Felix appeared at the chamber entrance, flanked by Nelson. The king looked haggard, as if he hadn't slept in days. His amber eyes found Rosalie's, and the pain in them was visceral. I've been researching alternatives all night, he said desperately. There has to be another way. Some loophole we haven't considered. There isn't. Rosalie moved toward him, cupping his face with both hands. We both know there isn't. Lenore designed this curse to be unbreakable except through impossible sacrifice. That's what makes it brilliant. That's what makes it cruel. She pressed her forehead to his. But I'm choosing this, Felix. Not because I have to. Because I want to. Because you deserve freedom, and all those people out there deserve peace. Because my grandmother died protecting this secret, and I'm going to honor that sacrifice by finishing what she started. You barely know me, Felix whispered, his voice breaking. 3 days. You've known me for 3 days. How can you give up who you are? For someone you barely know. I know enough. Rosalie pulled back, meeting his eyes. I know you've spent 3 centuries trying to be better than your curse. I know you protected those women in the West Tower when you could have used them and discarded them. I know you investigated the attacks on villages, even when everyone believed you were the monster causing them. She smiled sadly. And I know that if our positions were reversed, you'd make the same choice I'm making now, because that's who you are. That's who you've always been, beneath the fur and claws and ancient magic. Tears tracked down Felix's face the first time she'd seen him cry. You're extraordinary. You know that? In 300 years, I've never met anyone like you. Then make sure whoever I become remembers that, Rosalie said. Make sure the merged soul carries forward the best parts of Rosalie Price, not just the fragment of your mate's essence. Promise me that. I promise. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips gentle and desperate and full of everything words couldn't express. I promise I'll honor who you were, who you are, no matter what happens in that chamber. A bell tolled somewhere in the castle depths. Midnight. The blood moon had reached its zenith. It's time, Nelson said quietly. He looked at Rosalie with unexpected respect. What you're doing, it's the bravest thing I've ever witnessed. Truly. Rosalie nodded, then turned to the 7 other women. Ready? They formed a circle, holding hands. 8 fragments, about to become 9. 9 pieces about to become 1. Together, they walked into the ritual chamber. The air inside felt thick, charged with power that made Rosalie's skin prickle. The symbols on the walls glowed brighter as they entered, responding to the presence of the fragments. Felix followed, moving to the center platform, where ancient markings designated the anchor point. Each of you takes a position on the outer circles, he instructed, his voice formal now, ritualistic. Rosalie, you stand at the northern point, the position of completion and rebirth. The rest of you arrange yourselves according to when you were found. Mia to the east, Eunice to the south. The women moved into position, and Rosalie noticed that the circles weren't just decorative. They were conduits, channels carved into the stone that connected each outer position to the center platform where Felix stood. What happens next? Tiffany asked, her voice small in the vast chamber. Felix pulled out a silver knife, its blade etched with the same symbols that covered the walls. Blood magic. The curse was created with blood, so it must be broken the same way. Each of you cuts your palm and lets 3 drops fall into the channel. The blood will flow to the center, and when all 9 fragments have contributed, he paused. The merging begins. And if we survive? Millie asked. Then we become something new. Rosalie answered before Felix could. Something that's never existed before. 9 lives, 9 perspectives. 9 souls compressed into one being. We won't lose ourselves entirely, at least, that's what I'm choosing to believe. We'll just become more. She hoped that was true. She hoped the person who emerged from this ritual would still care about justice and protecting innocence and honoring her grandmother's sacrifice. But there were no guarantees. There was only faith and trust, complete, absolute trust that Felix wouldn't abuse the power this ritual would give him. That the connection they were forging would be used to heal, not harm. I'm ready, Rosalie said, holding out her hand for the knife. Felix gave it to her, his fingers lingering on hers. Thank you. For everything. For giving me hope when I'd stopped believing hope was possible. She smiled. Thank Felix. Don't waste what I'm giving you. Be the king these people deserve. Be the man I believe you can be. Then she drew the blade across her palm. The pain was sharp but bearable. Blood welled up, crimson and bright, and she turned her hand to let 3 drops fall into the channel carved at her feet. The moment the blood touched stone, the chamber erupted with light. The symbols blazed like miniature suns. The channels glowed red as blood flowed through them, not following gravity, but drawn by magic toward the center platform where Felix stood. Around the chamber, the other women were cutting their palms, adding their blood to the ritual. 8 streams of crimson converged on Felix. He gasped as the blood touched his feet, his body arching as power flooded through him. The curse marks that had covered his skin for 300 years began to glow silver and black, writhing like living things. "It's working," Alicia breathed. But then Rosalie felt a pulling sensation in her chest, as if something vital was being drawn out of her. Not painful, exactly, but profound. Like her soul was being tugged in 2 directions at once. The fragments, the 2 pieces she carried, were trying to separate, trying to join the merging that was happening at the center of the ritual. "Rosalie," Felix's voice was distant, distorted. "You need to hold on, don't let go of yourself." But how do you hold on to yourself when yourself is being fundamentally rewritten? How do you maintain identity when your very soul is being asked to dissolve and reform? Trust, she remembered. Lenore had said the key was complete trust. So Rosalie closed her eyes and trusted. She trusted that Felix would guide the ritual properly. Trusted that the other fragments would support her instead of overwhelming her. Trusted that somewhere in the merged soul, Rosalie Price would still exist, changed, yes, but not destroyed. She trusted, and she let go. The world exploded into sensation. Suddenly she wasn't just herself anymore. She was Mia, feeling the terror of being chosen as the first bride and the relief of discovering kindness instead of cruelty. She was Eunice, carrying decades of abuse and finding sanctuary in an unexpected place. She was Kelly, fierce and protective, always ready to fight for those weaker than herself. She was all of them, every memory, every emotion, every defining moment that had shaped each fragment's life flooded through her consciousness. It should have been overwhelming. It should have shattered her mind. But instead, it felt like coming home. These weren't strangers wearing her face. They were sisters, family, different versions of the same fundamental soul, each one carrying pieces of the whole. And as they merged, as the boundaries between individual identities began to blur, Rosalie understood what Lenore had meant. This wasn't death. It was apotheosis. She was becoming something greater than any single person could be. She was becoming the sum of 9 lives, 9 perspectives, 9 different ways of seeing and experiencing the world. She would carry all their strengths and all their wounds, all their love and all their pain. And at the center of it all, grounding her, was Felix. She could feel him now, not just physically, but spiritually. Could sense his thoughts, his emotions, 300 years of loneliness, and determination, and desperate hope. The curse had bound him, but it hadn't broken him. He'd remained himself despite everything, just as she would remain herself despite this transformation. The merging accelerated. Light poured from Rosalie's body, from all 8 women's bodies, streams of pure white radiance flowing toward the center where Felix stood. His curse marks cracked and splintered, pieces of ancient magic breaking apart like shattered glass. "It's working." Nelson's voice came from somewhere far away. "The curse is breaking." But then something went wrong. The light from Rosalie flickered, turning from white to crimson. The 2 fragments she carried, the 8th and 9th, created a resonance that was too powerful, too intense. Lenore had been right about that. The pressure was building, threatening to tear her apart from the inside. "Rosalie," Felix's shout was anguished. "Hold on, I've got you." She felt his consciousness wrap around hers, protective and fierce. He was trying to absorb the excess energy, trying to shield her from the resonance that was killing her. But he couldn't do it alone. The curse was breaking. Yes, but it was taking everything he had just to survive the transformation. Then the other fragments did something Rosalie hadn't expected. They reached back. Mia, Eunice, Kelly, Tiffany, Millie, Neva, Alicia, all of them extended their merged consciousness toward Rosalie, creating a web of support, sharing the burden, distributing the resonance across all 8 women instead of forcing Rosalie to bear it alone. "We're in this together," she felt Mia's thoughts whisper. 9 fragments, 9 lives, but only 1 soul. We survive together or not at all. The resonance stabilized. The crimson light faded back to white, and Rosalie felt the final barriers dissolve as the merging completed. 9 became 1. The ritual chamber fell silent except for heavy breathing and the soft sound of tears. Felix collapsed to his knees on the center platform, his body convulsing with transformation. But this time it wasn't the curse changing him into a beast. It was humanity returning. The fur receded. The claws retracted. The curse marks crumbled to dust and blew away on a wind that didn't exist. And when Felix finally looked up, his eyes were still amber, but they were human eyes. Mortal eyes. The curse was broken. On the outer circles, 8 women stood trembling and changed. They were still individuals, still themselves in most ways. But there was a connection between them now that hadn't existed before, a bond deeper than friendship or family. They were pieces of the same soul, and they would carry that connection for the rest of their lives. And in the northern circle, Rosalie Price opened her eyes. She was still herself. Still the girl who'd lost everything and turned that loss into purpose. Still the assassin who'd come to kill a monster and found a man instead. But she was also more. She carried the wisdom of 8 other lives, the strength of 8 other souls, the love and pain and triumph of women who'd suffered and survived and chosen to risk everything for a chance at freedom. Did it work? She asked, her voice hoarse. Felix stood slowly, looking down at his hands, human hands, unmarked and normal. He laughed, the sound breaking on a sob. It worked. Gods, it actually worked. He looked at her, and his expression was incandescent with joy and relief and love. You did it, Rosalie. You broke a curse that was supposed to be unbreakable. She stepped off her circle, and the other women did the same. They moved toward each other instinctively, forming a group in the center of the chamber. 8 bodies, but parts of one soul. It should have felt strange. It should have felt wrong. But it felt perfect. What happens now? Kelly asked, speaking for all of them. Felix looked at the 9 women who'd given him back his humanity, and his smile was gentle. Now? Now we have one more problem to solve. Lenore is still in the dungeons, and we still need to find out who else was working with her, who helped orchestrate the attacks, who commanded the wolves, who's been pulling strings while she was imprisoned. Because the scarred wolf with the gray fur was still out there. The rebel faction was still operating. And breaking the curse, while monumental, was only the beginning. The real battle was just starting. Chapter 10. The True King. Dawn broke over Blackthorn Castle in shades of gold, and rose the first sunrise Felix had seen with truly human eyes in 300 years. He stood on the battlements, breathing in air that smelled sweeter, feeling wind that touched skin instead of fur. Everything was sharper, clearer, more real than it had been since the curse took hold. He was mortal again. Vulnerable, human, and he had never felt more powerful. You should be resting, Rosalie said, joining him at the wall. She looked tired but radiant, changed in ways that went beyond the physical. There was a depth to her now, a quiet strength that came from carrying 8 other souls within her own. I've slept enough for 3 lifetimes, Felix said, pulling her close. Right now I want to feel everything, experience everything, remember what it means to be alive without the curse hanging over me. She leaned into him, and they stood together watching the sun climb higher. In the courtyard below, the castle was already stirring. Servants preparing breakfast, guards changing shifts, the ordinary rhythms of life continuing despite everything that had changed. Lenore still hasn't talked, Rosalie said eventually. Nelson interrogated her all night. She won't reveal who her confederates are, who commanded the wolves wearing your sigil. She just sits in that cell and smiles like she's already won. Maybe she has, Felix said quietly. The curse is broken. Yes, but the damage it caused, the fear and hatred people have for me, that doesn't disappear overnight. There are still those who see me as a monster, still those who would prefer a different king on this throne. Then we change their minds. Rosalie's voice was firm. We investigate the attacks systematically. We find evidence of who really ordered them. We expose the conspiracy and show the kingdom that you've been protecting them, not terrorizing them, for 300 years. Felix smiled at her determination. You make it sound simple. It won't be simple, she admitted. But it's necessary. And we're not alone anymore. She gestured to the courtyard, where the other 7 women were emerging from the West Tower. We have resources now. People who believe in you, who help rebuild what the curse destroyed. As if summoned by their conversation, Nelson appeared at the battlement stairs, his expression grim. Your Majesty, There's been a development. Felix's stomach tightened. What kind of development? A messenger arrived from the Northern Territories. There was another attack last night, the village of Winterholm. Same pattern. Wolves bearing your sigil. Systematic slaughter. A message left in blood. Nelson's jaw clenched. But this time, they left more than a message. They left a body. A lycanthrope who'd been tortured before being killed. And carved into his chest was the symbol of the Silver Moon Rebellion. Rosalie went rigid. The rebel faction. They're still operating even with Lenore captured. Which means she was never the true leader, Felix said, pieces clicking together. She was powerful, yes, and she orchestrated much of the conspiracy. But someone else commands the rebels. Someone who's been hidden so well that even Lenore's capture hasn't disrupted their plans. We need to go to Winterholm, Rosalie said immediately. Investigate the scene before evidence is compromised. If the rebels left a body as a message, they want us to find something. Or, it's another trap, Nelson warned. Like Thornwick was. They could be luring you out again, trying to finish what they started. Let them try, Felix said, his voice hard. I'm not cursed anymore. I'm not weak or divided. And I have allies now who won't abandon me the moment things get dangerous. He looked at Rosalie. We ride within the hour. Small party, fast horses. And this time, we're ending this conspiracy. Once and for all. Winterholm was smaller than Thornwick, a mining village nestled in the northern mountains where the air was thin and cold. The attack had been just as brutal, 15 dead. The survivors huddled in the town hall, too traumatized to speak coherently. But the body left in the village square was the real message. The lycanthrope had been young, perhaps 25, with dark hair and features that looked vaguely familiar. He'd been tortured extensively before death, burn marks, broken bones, wounds that suggested someone had taken their time causing maximum pain. And carved across his chest, deep enough to scar even lycanthrope healing, was the silver moon symbol alongside 4 words. Traitors. Die. Loyalty endures. They killed one of their own, Rosalie said, studying the body. This wasn't an enemy. This was someone in the rebellion who did something the leadership didn't like. Felix knelt beside the corpse, examining the wounds with clinical detachment. These torture marks, they're precise. Professional. Whoever did this has extensive experience with interrogation and punishment. His eyes narrowed. And look at the silver burns. They used pure silver on a lycanthrope, which means they had access to refined materials. Not something common rebels could easily acquire. Someone with resources, Nelson said, joining them. Someone connected to trade networks. Or noble houses that deal in precious metals. A voice called out from across the square. Your Majesty, we found something. One of the guards was waving from a building on the square's edge, the village elder's home, now covered in the same blood-scrawled threats they'd seen before. Felix, Rosalie, and Nelson hurried over. Inside, the guard pointed to a desk where papers had been scattered. Communications, sire. Letters detailing shipments of silver weapons, movements of rebel cells, and… He held up a document with shaking hands. A list of attacks planned for the next 3 months. At least 20 villages targeted, all designed to look like Your Majesty's work. Felix took the document, scanning it quickly. His expression darkened with each line. This is extensive, coordinated. Whoever's leading this rebellion has resources I didn't think possible. They've infiltrated trade guilds, bribed officials, recruited lycanthropes from across the kingdom. He looked up. And there's a name mentioned multiple times as the operational commander. Someone organizing the attacks, managing the logistics. Who? Rosalie demanded. Felix's jaw tightened. Stan Mills, the Lord of the Eastern Territories. One of my most trusted advisors. Silence fell like a hammer. Stan Mills was a human lord who'd served the crown for 40 years. He'd been instrumental in peace negotiations, in managing the delicate balance between human and lycanthrope populations. He was respected, influential, and had access to every aspect of kingdom governance. If he was the rebel leader, then the conspiracy went deeper than anyone had imagined. It makes sense, Nelson said slowly. Mills has always been vocal about lycanthrope rights, about giving our kind more political power. I thought he was an ally, But what if he was radicalizing wolves against you? Convincing them that your curse made you weak, that a human lord could rule better than a cursed king? He wanted the throne, Rosalie realized. Not for himself directly, he's human. And the kingdom wouldn't accept a non-lycanthrope king. But if he could control whoever took your place, if he could position himself as kingmaker. She looked at Felix. He'd have all the power without any of the responsibility or danger. Felix crumpled the document in his fist. He used my curse against me. Used the fear and hatred it generated to build a rebel faction. And he used Lenore probably promised her that he'd help keep me cursed if she helped him destabilize the kingdom. Where is Mills now? Rosalie asked. The Eastern Territories, Nelson said. His estate is fortified, defensible. If he knows we're coming, he knows, Felix interrupted. The moment we found these documents, the moment we captured Lenore, he knew his conspiracy was unraveling. He's probably preparing for a final stand, gathering his forces, getting ready to make a move for the throne. Then we move first, Rosalie said fiercely. We expose him before he can consolidate power. We show the kingdom exactly what he's done, all the innocent blood he spilled in his quest for control. Felix looked at her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. Pride, love, absolute trust. You've become quite the strategist, he said softly. My fierce assassin bride. I'm not just yours, Rosalie corrected, but she smiled. I'm theirs too. She gestured to where the other 7 women had joined them in the village square, drawn by the commotion. We're all connected now, all part of this, and we're all going to help you bring Stan Mills to justice. Mia stepped forward, her expression determined. We spent years in that tower thinking we were helpless, thinking we were just pieces of a puzzle with no agency of our own. But we're more than that now. We're united. And together we're powerful enough to change the kingdom. We fight with you, Eunice added. Not as fragments, but as allies. As friends. As family. The other women murmured agreement, and Felix looked at them all with something like wonder. 300 years of isolation, of being feared and hated, and now he stood surrounded by people who believed in him, who'd sacrificed parts of themselves to free him from his curse. Then we ride for the Eastern Territories, he said, his voice ringing with authority. We gather evidence, we confront Stan Mills, and we end this conspiracy before any more innocent blood is spilled. He looked at each woman in turn. But I won't force you into danger. This is my fight. No, Rosalie interrupted. It's our fight. Your enemies are our enemies. Your kingdom is our home. And we're not letting you face this alone. Not anymore. The journey to the Eastern Territories took 2 days of hard riding. They traveled with a small force, 20 guards, all personally vetted by Nelson. All lycanthropes loyal to Felix beyond question. The landscape gradually shifted from mountains to rolling hills, and finally to the lush farmlands that made the Eastern Territories so wealthy. Stan Mills' estate rose from the countryside like a statement of power, a massive manor house surrounded by high walls and guard towers. As they approached, Rosalie could see movement on the walls. Archers, soldiers. Mills had been expecting them. He's fortified, Nelson observed. This won't be a simple arrest. Then we make it complicated, Felix said. We expose him publicly, force him to answer for his crimes where everyone can see. He turned to one of the guards. Send word to the territorial lords. Tell them the king requests their presence at Mills' estate for an emergency council. Tell them evidence of treason has been discovered, and all nobles must witness the proceedings. The guard rode off immediately, and Felix looked at Rosalie. If we're going to bring him down, we do it legally, properly, with witnesses and evidence, and the full weight of kingdom law. Smart, Rosalie said. Make it impossible for him to spin this as tyranny or false accusation. Force him to defend himself in front of his peers. Exactly. Felix's smile was grim. He wanted to play politics. Well, I've been ruling for 300 years. I know how this game is played. Over the next several hours, lords and ladies from across the Eastern Territories arrived, summoned by the king's command, curious about the emergency council. They gathered in Mills's great hall, a massive room with vaulted ceilings and expensive tapestries. Stan Mills stood at the head of the room. a man in his 60s with silver hair and calculating eyes. He smiled when Felix entered, the picture of gracious hospitality. "Your Majesty," he said, bowing. "This is an unexpected honor. Though I wish you'd sent word of your visit. I would have prepared a proper welcome." "This isn't a social call," Felix said coldly. He gestured, and Nelson laid out the documents they'd found in Winterholm. "These are communications detailing a conspiracy to destabilize my kingdom. They contain evidence of organized attacks on villages, manipulation of trade networks, recruitment of rebel lycanthropes, and systematic efforts to destroy my credibility." He looked around at the assembled nobles, and they all point to one man as the operational commander of this conspiracy, Lord Stan Mills of the Eastern Territories. Gasps echoed through the hall. Mills' expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Recognition. Resignation. "These are serious accusations, Your Majesty," he said calmly. "Based on documents that could easily be forged." "Could they?" Rosalie stepped forward, holding up another piece of evidence, a letter with Mill's personal seal. "This correspondence was found in Lenore Lyon's possession. It details your agreement to help her maintain Felix's curse in exchange for her assistance in destabilizing the kingdom. Your seal. Your handwriting. Verified by 3 independent scholars." Mill's facade finally cracked. "You have no idea what you're interfering with. The kingdom needs change. Real change. Not a cursed king who's been failing us for centuries." "I was cursed," Felix interrupted. Past tense. "The curse was broken 2 days ago during a blood moon ritual. I'm fully human now, mortal, free." He stepped closer to Mills, and every noble in the room watched with rapt attention. "Which means all your plans, all your schemes based on my weakness, they're obsolete. The cursed king you wanted to overthrow doesn't exist anymore." Mills stared at him, understanding dawning. His entire conspiracy had been built on Felix's vulnerability, on the assumption that the curse would continue to weaken him, making him easier to supplant. But now that foundation was gone. "You've committed treason," Felix continued. "You've orchestrated the deaths of hundreds of innocent people. You've betrayed the trust I placed in you, and manipulated good people into following your rebellion, and you did it all for power." His voice was hard. "The penalty for treason is death, but I'm not going to kill you, Stan. I'm going to do something worse. I'm going to let you live in exile, stripped of your titles and lands, forever remembered as the man who sacrificed innocence for personal ambition and lost anyway." Mills lunged forward with a snarl, pulling a dagger from his robes. But Nelson was faster, disarming him with brutal efficiency. The Lord collapsed to his knees, suddenly looking every one of his 60 years. "It wasn't supposed to end like this," he whispered. "I was supposed to save the kingdom, make it better, give lycanthropes the power they deserve." "By slaughtering humans who had nothing to do with politics?" Rosalie asked coldly. "By framing an innocent king for atrocities you committed? That's not salvation, Lord Mills. That's just ambition dressed up as righteousness." Guards moved forward, binding Mills in chains. The other nobles watched in stunned silence as their peer was led away, his legacy destroyed in a single afternoon. Felix turned to address the assembled lords and ladies. "This conspiracy ends today. Anyone who participated in the rebellion has 1 week to come forward and confess. Those who do will face lighter sentences. Those who don't." He let the threat hang unspoken. "The kingdom is changing. I'm changing. And we're going to build something better together. Something that doesn't require innocent blood to maintain." That evening, as the sun set over the Eastern Territories and justice settled over the land like a cleansing rain, Rosalie stood with Felix on the manor's balcony. "It's over," she said quietly. "The conspiracy, the attacks, all of it. This chapter is over," Felix corrected. "But there will be more challenges. More enemies. More people who see me as something to fear rather than trust." He pulled her close, resting his chin on top of her head. "But for the first time in 300 years, I believe we can face those challenges, together." Rosalie thought about the girl she'd been just days ago, an assassin bride with daggers hidden in her wedding dress, coming to kill a monster. She thought about her grandmother's sacrifice, her parents' deaths, 3 years of grief turned into purpose. And she thought about the 8 women who'd merged their souls with hers, who'd given her strength when she needed it most, who'd taught her that sacrifice could be transcendent rather than tragic. "I'm glad I didn't kill you," she said, and felt Felix laugh against her hair. "I'm glad you didn't kill me too." They stood together watching stars emerge in the darkening sky, a cursed king finally freed, an assassin bride who'd become something more, and a kingdom slowly learning that monsters were sometimes just men wearing the wrong labels. Behind them, the other 7 women emerged onto the balcony, joining the couple in companionable silence. 9 souls, 8 bodies, one impossible story of love and sacrifice and hope against all odds. "What happens now?" Mia asked eventually. Felix smiled, pulling all of them into his orbit with the natural authority of someone who'd finally grown into his crown. "Now? Now we rebuild. We heal. We show the kingdom what real leadership looks like." His eyes found Rosalie's, warm and full of promise. "And we live. Fully. Completely. Making every day count after 300 years of existing in the shadows." Rosalie leaned into him, surrounded by her sisters in soul. And for the first time since her parents died, she felt something she'd thought was lost forever: peace. The blood moon had risen and fallen. The curse had broken. The conspiracy had crumbled. And in its place, something new was beginning. Something bright and fierce and full of possibility. A kingdom united, a king redeemed, and a bride who'd come to assassinate a monster but stayed to love a man instead. It was, Rosalie thought, exactly the ending her grandmother would have wanted. "Love conquers all," the old woman had whispered. And for once, impossibly, she'd been right. Epilogue. 6 months later, Blackthorn Castle hosted its first royal wedding in 300 years. Felix stood at the altar dressed in formal regalia, finally comfortable in his own skin after centuries of fighting against it. And walking down the aisle toward him not as a prisoner or a sacrifice, but as a partner choosing him freely, was Rosalie Price. Behind her walked 7 bridesmaids, each one carrying a piece of the same soul, each one connected by bonds that went deeper than blood or friendship. The kingdom watched and celebrated, seeing not a cursed king and his assassin bride, but a love story that had required impossible sacrifice and emerged stronger for it. When Felix took Rosalie's hands and spoke his vows, promising to honor her, to protect her, to remember always the girl who'd been brave enough to trust a monster, there wasn't a dry eye in the cathedral. And when Rosalie spoke her own vows in return, promising to stand beside him, to challenge him, to remind him always that he was worthy of the crown he'd been given, the kingdom understood that something fundamental had changed. They weren't just gaining a queen, they were gaining hope. The ceremony concluded with a kiss that tasted of moonflowers and second chances. And as Felix and Rosalie turned to face their kingdom, their people, their home, their future, they did so knowing that the hardest battles were behind them. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. If you were Rosalie, standing in that ritual chamber with 2 fragments burning inside you, would you have gone through with it? Would you sacrifice who you are to save a man you barely know, and a kingdom that isn't yours? Drop your answer in the comments, and tell me if you think you'd be brave enough to make the choice Rosalie made. I'll be reading every single one.